in the green folder for you.
All right, welcome and good evening. It is 7:04 p.m. on Monday, July the 7th. Hope everyone had a great long and holiday weekend. I'm going to bring to order the meeting of the Hamilton Select Board. Bill Olson will not be with us this evening, so I will do my best to chair the meeting, but we do have a quorum in the room, so I don't believe we need an attendance call, correct? So why don't we just get right in? There is a long agenda here. I don't know, I think I know who did the agenda, but it seems pretty meaty. Okay, we'll start. We did the call to order, did not need a roll call. Announcements, board and committee openings. So we have one opening for the Affordable Housing Trust. We have 3 openings on the Conservation Commission. We have 1 opening for a member of Historic District Commission for the Community Preservation Committee. We have 2 openings for 3-year terms and 2 openings for 2-year terms, with 1 must be a resident of the Historic District and 1 must be a resident realtor, and that is for the Historic District Commission. The Human Rights Commission has 2 at-large openings, and the Hamilton Wenham Cultural Council has 1 opening. So, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a full agenda, and on that agenda, we will talk more about public comment, but as such, right now, until we get a policy in place, we're going to have a maximum of 20 minutes up front if needed here. Based on the crowd, no person should speak for more than 3 minutes at a time. But you can talk about any topic, whether it's on the agenda or not. So at this point, I'll entertain any public comment.
Thank you, sir. Hello, my name is Edward Wilson, and you can call me Ted. I'm one of Hamilton's full-time 911 dispatchers. I'm here representing my fellow dispatchers on behalf of what we strongly believe is in the town's best interest. Should you decide to cut Hamilton's 911 center and join regional, Hamilton will never again be able to restore local dispatch due to the prohibitive cost required to do so. So please know this is a permanent decision that you are considering. Regional promises to be free for a few years, but they make no guarantee that it will remain so indefinitely. There's a very real possibility that Hamilton could someday be handed a bill with no other option than to pay it. One of the most important benefits to local dispatch is having staff in the station 24/7. Hamilton Police Department is the only point of government in town where you can reach a human between 5 p.m. and 6 a.m., and that's every day of the year. We develop relationships with Hamilton's residents over the years, and we take the time and effort to go the extra mile while assisting your residents with many tasks that North Shore Regional will not. I've read the feasibility study. Regional uses language that will sound very impressive to a layperson who wouldn't know any better, while they use the same technology and training standards that we do. In the Hamilton feasibility study, Regional states that they staff less than 1 dispatcher per town, with 6 dispatchers on during the day and evening shifts and 4 on the overnights for their 7 towns, soon to be 9. According to Regional's most recent annual report, only 17 of their 31 dispatch positions are staffed, leaving 14 positions vacant. North Shore Regional are currently taking on Boxford and North Reading, while their employees are constantly forced to work involuntary overtime. Consider the quality of service Hamilton will be receiving after the sales pitch is history and the ink is dry. There's a lot more to each of these statements than I have time to explain here, which is why this morning I sent you a letter which elaborates much further on these points and several others, such as the direct work relationship that we have with our first responders and how this affects officer safety, as well as how we'll never dispatch responders to the wrong town. I ask that you please read what I've written to you and take my points into consideration to make the most informed decision that you can. If anyone listening would like a copy of my letter to the board, you can reach out to me at tedwilsonsemail@gmail.com. I'm happy to share it. Members of the Hamilton Board of Selectmen, I urge you to please speak with your residents before making this decision. Find out what they want and consider how they will feel walking into an empty police station lobby for all the years to come. Your dispatchers also encourage you to come by the police station and visit us. Ask any questions you may have, see what we do and how we do it. I know the town needs to find ways to cut costs and make the budget work. However, we feel very strongly that the value of what you will be losing by cutting local dispatch is far greater than the cost that you'll be saving. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ted. And thank you for your letter.
Good evening, Jeff Austin, Hamilton resident. During the Select Board meeting on June 16th, this board discussed the open meeting law violations which occurred on May 5th. My comments tonight are regarding the manner in which that discussion was handled and what that handling says about the leadership, accountability, and basic decency. On the first matter, Mr. Olson's improper restriction on public input, I listened carefully as members of this board suggested that no violation occurred because protections in their mind do not extend beyond the designated public period at the beginning of the meeting. That interpretation is legally incorrect. Once public input is allowed, even during business, both constitutional and statutory protections apply. Dismissing those protections is not only wrong, it signals a fundamental misunderstanding of the public's rights. The second matter, the silencing of Select Board member Rosemary Kennedy, was even more troubling. As the only woman on this board, Ms. Kennedy asked multiple times to respond to a resident's direct comment to her. She was denied that opportunity multiple times by Mr. Olson. And when this board reviewed the incident, multiple members claimed not to recall what happened. Only after Ms. Kennedy, visibly upset, gathered her things and walked out in silence did Mr. Wilson acknowledge the event at all. And yet this board still found no fault. What I witnessed wasn't just a failure of the process, it was a failure of courage, and frankly, of character. Instead of acknowledging wrongdoing and addressing it, the board appeared more concerned with insulating Mr. Olson from any consequences. That's not public governance. And while I stand by the substance of my concerns, I must also take responsibility for my tone. At that moment, I was so appalled that I called this board cowards out loud. And while that reflected my genuine frustration, I recognize that comment was inappropriate and unproductive. I apologize to those on this board who did not deserve that label. But I hope my apology serves as an example. It only takes a moment to show humility. Mr. Olson could have avoided all of this, the complaints, the frustration, the division, by simply acknowledging the errors after the May 5th meeting. That moment still remains. And if accountability means anything in this town, I urge this board to take it and avoid a long, continuous, drawn-out battle with residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
A quick question for Mr. Wilson. Will you be taking a vote on public comment procedure in this meeting, or will that be in a future meeting? I assume since Mr.
How
Olson's...
far we get along that, was there a planned vote this evening, or just further discussion? I know we didn't get a lot of feedback between when we asked for
Okay.
feedback, so
So presumably Mr. Olson would be present for
Yeah.
that. Okay, so I'll hold my remarks until such time. I was
So I'll
referring to...
say there'll be no vote on that.
Okay. Then just one quick thing, which is part of my remarks. Just to sort of clarify something that came up incidentally at the last joint select board, planning board meeting. I believe you were there, and some other people, Mr. Galuza was there. I did mention, just incidentally, we were talking about the public concern about the Winthrop School site. And some people would, in the public there's concern confusing it with 3A and how they're technically separate. But I did mention that some of the confusion may come from some of the town officials, and I quoted briefly or paraphrased, if I have it here. Yes, I quote the town manager, where I said he had mentioned in a previous meeting that he would, and here's the quote, if we were to get the 14 acres of the Winthrop site back, I would recommend to the select board to put the whole thing up for sale anyway, unquote. So he was saying he would advise the board to put it up for sale. This was during the select board workshop on July 29th, 2024, timestamp 1 hour, 53 minutes. Joe repeatedly, at least 3 times, to my recollection, you can hear him off camera at least once, denied making that statement, which I find curious, and I was wondering if maybe Joe could, if he wants to explain why he denied making that statement. I think certainly that's a very interesting statement, given that people are concerned about, tied in with the school building committee, that there might be possible residential development, high-density development on the Winthrop site. So if there are town officials, maybe amongst them themselves thinking, oh, we should sell that off, that's, I think, of great public interest. And I don't know why Joe denied saying that, so I'd just like to bring that up. Thank you.
Okay, appreciate that.
Deb Safford, Maple Street. I've just got 3 questions that I'll just pose, and I hope that someone will pick it up and answer them later, and then a comment. So the first of 3 questions is on the town warrant. It says, under 1, identify, create 3 new zoning districts, blah, 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 to specify that multifamily housing is the only use allowed in those districts. And I'm curious, is that a true statement? Does that then mean that if someone was to buy a lot and the house needed substantial repair and more than 50% of it needed to be torn down and rebuilt, does that mean it would have to be a multifamily? Like, is that precluding single family? Because it says specifically. I think that's a really important question, if you could answer that. The second question is on the minutes for the June 24th meeting between the Select Board and the Planning Board. It's after the votes. It said discussion followed on the best approach to explain to the public the implications of a yes or no vote. Joe reported Utila is working on presentation slides for town meeting also, and another consultant is preparing a report speaking to the potential economic impact of 3A, end quote. I'm curious, who is the other consultant doing the economic impact on 3A? And as a caveat to that one, I think that to say that there's no financial impact to the vote of 3A is misleading. It might be technically accurate in that it hasn't happened yet, like they haven't been built, but I think it's a disservice to the community to not address the ramifications of zoning, assuming that they will be built. I think that's, if you build it, they will come, and at least some section is going to come, and I think to say that there's no, I think that just has a discrediting and I know that it's hard work, I know it's a big exercise, but I think it's not accurate, and I would hope that we could do better than that. The third question is about the letter of April 25th, 25 to the lawyers, actually the response, which says that it's addressed to the town managers of Hamilton and Wenham, answering questions that have been posed. 4 questions, one of which includes the issue of the regional school district being able to call for a district-wide election, which again is not something that the town does, but it's something that the regional does, which is a separate entity, independent from us, right? They're kind of a separate governing body. And so I'm curious as to why that was asked when it's not really in your purview to execute that. It's a curiosity. Why was it a curiosity? Who authorized that? And, you know, I think that's just a really important thing, because it was also in April, which says that these ideas were floating around, and it's a big disservice to the community in terms of confidence, and you know, really the integrity of this whole process has been so inflamed because people feel like the votes don't matter, but we're going to keep doing it. So I think that there's some issues about, like, who authorized you to do it? Why did you do it? Why was that specific question? I understand the other questions related to town, but that one didn't. And my final comment is to support the comments made earlier about the regionalization. I think, as we see with the school systems, regionalization removes our ability to have control over decision-making and how funds are used. We have seen that entities that are regionalized create slush funds, and then they do projects that are not necessarily in our best interests. We have an amazing big public service building that is being well utilized, and I do go in there and talk to them, and they are lovely, and I am grateful for the community and how all of our public service people, they know our citizens. And that's why people move here. Because the cops know us, the ambulance people know us, the firemen know us. And gosh darn it, isn't that an amazing thing? Why would we squander that? Why would we give that away for money? Like, when things just go down to money, I think we lose the integrity of why we're in a small town. Why did we move here? And how are you going to decide how to make that decision? What are the metrics you're going to use to decide to do that? Because saving money isn't always the right thing to do. And if it's a certain cost per household, there's 3,000 households, it's like $100 maybe. I bet people would rather do that than do some other things, like have multiple town meetings in a year. So please, if we need extra money, let's maybe take it from the HDC. They've got a huge slush fund. Let's maybe take a portion of the meals tax, put that towards the public call center. Why not? Because they're drinking, then they might get busted for drinking too much, right? It kind of goes together in some funny, weird way. But, you know, why not? It's supporting our residents. So please don't do any more regionalization. It just creates a lot of ill will, and it loses the ability for the residents to actually have a tangible impact on decision-making, prevents slush fund buildup where we lose our control, and we will surely have much less high-quality service when we need it. When you start feeling like you're in a heart attack, or your kid swallows something, or you're whatever you need, our people come. They're amazing. I've used them and had to use them multiple times, and it's devastating to think that that would be lost in this community. Please don't do that. Thank you.
Sandy Fisher, Greenbrook Road. I just want to echo comments of this dispatcher and also Ms. Safford. I really think we should keep the local 911. And I can't state it any better than what he said and what she said, so I won't go on, but I just wanted to say it's very important. I really have been in there too, a number of times, so thank you so much. I do think it's important. They respond very quickly. It's kind of startling to hear that all the regional dispatchers' positions are not filled, so they're working overtime. That's not a good situation. I think keep it local, and it's worth paying more to keep it local. Thanks.
Good evening, Steve Jones from Bradford Road, and also one of the dispatchers here in town for the last 12 years. I totally agree with what Ted and the other residents have said tonight. You know, being a lifelong resident of the town as well, it's the culture of the town of what we do. You know, the town has always supported public safety, whether the fire department needed $1 million fire truck, or, you know, the police department needed to hire another officer or need more cruisers and that sort of thing. We're part of that. You know, we're not out there, you know, with Luca getting pet or, you know, spraying the kids down at the park or whatever, but we're giving the customer service on the phone. And we could go on for hours about the little things that we do that not necessarily you're going to get from regional. Is regional going to answer a 911 call and send, you know, somebody to your house for a heart attack? Yes, they are. But we all do that. And, you know, some things have come up during some preliminary discussions that in reading through the feasibility study, we currently do all that here in town. We have all that training. We have, you know, they talk about CAD systems and mapping and things like that. That's all presently in place. Now, if our managers, you know, decide that they don't want to utilize, you know, CAD or the mapping, that's not on us. We follow the protocols. There are policies and procedures and standards that are in place. You know, mutual aid. You know, we can just as easily get on the radio or the telephone with regional, and they can dispatch Wenham to anything like that. So as we go forward in this process, and I expect that this will continue on for, you know, at least another meeting or so, in reference to the feasibility study, just a couple things. I just want to make sure that going forward, you guys have all the correct information and the townspeople have all the information. A couple things, you know, reading through this again before I came here, there are some discrepancies in statistics and numbers and that sort of thing. Specifically, on page 8 of the feasibility study, section 2.1.1, when it talks about statistics and, you know, average calls and that sort of thing, those numbers seem to contradict what's also listed on page 25, section 4.2.1. And then on page 11, when it references fire calls, you know, if you refer to that same section on page 25, there are different numbers as well. So, you know, hopefully that's been corrected or, you know, presented so we have the right facts, so we know the correct statistics that we're following here. And also on the feasibility study, and I understand it's not made from scratch. I mean, there's cutting and pasting, you know, we all do it. But there are, you know, there's one reference in here when it comes to training, you know, on a footnote that it says that Rowley is going to be paying, you know, for the police training to go up there. I'm sure it means Hamilton, but it kind of just takes into account, like, what are they presenting here? I mean, if we're making a significant decision I think you ought to have all the correct facts and to be informed and get a lot more feedback, that it's impossible for us to do it in 3 minutes. So hopefully that procedure will change in the near future as well. So, thank you.
Hi, Janet Jones, Bradford Road. Speaking as a citizen and a taxpayer, if you get rid of the 911 call, as I think what's going to affect mostly are the elderly, the older population, the senior citizens. My in-laws, for instance, they're both have not been well. They've used it in recent times a lot for falls. And it comforts my mother-in-law to know, she knows all the dispatchers, they're very familiar. And the other senior citizens that call, it comforts them while they're waiting for that help to arrive. Some of them live alone, they have nobody else that they can call. As the wife of a dispatcher, these guys like put their heart and soul into everything. I know Steve in particular does. I think we've both been in customer service our whole life. It's a dying art. It's something that we refuse to let die in our business. He's going to refuse to let that die in this town, as are the other dispatchers. And as you know, my parents raised me, be careful what you wish for, and nothing in life is free.
All right, anything? Well, I absolutely appreciate the letters, the feedback. You know, we'll hit some of these along the way, but just, you know, high-level comment. You know, this is the first of many discussions, you know, on the 911 call center. I think it's been discussed over the past 4 or 5 years, different scenarios. Wenham was with us, Wenham was out. Hey, Danvers is looking for people. No, yeah, the regionalized center has tried in the past. So we're gonna just take a look at it, look at this feasibility study, look at cost, benefits. It's not just cost in all cases, it's a benefit analysis as well. That's why the stats, Stephen, to your points, are so critical. You know, I know we do have this public comment rule right now in the 3 minutes up front. You guys, you communicated well. I think you got your points out, but, you know, I would almost suggest that in one of the future meetings, we do get some participation at the table, you know, from somebody on dispatch or somebody that can really help us dig through and help you with it. I know we rely on you in that, but they live, breathe it every day as well. So I wouldn't mind that participation in one of the future 2 comments or meetings or so that we have down the road, however many there are, so. Okay, let's keep going. Again, I think some of this will come up again later. I took some notes on some of your comments. Board and town manager reports, and any board updates? Start down the end, Ben, anything from you, or?
Not on the board updates, no.
Okay.
Nothing
Tom?
from me tonight, thanks, Bill.
Hi, Rosemary.
I'll just talk for just a couple of minutes about the COA. Council on Aging continues to search for an assistant director. Teresa told me she interviewed somebody and was fairly pleased with that person, so we'll just have to wait and see how that process plays out. There was a yearly police department and fire department barbecue at the COA about 2 weeks ago, and everybody had a great time as usual when the police and firemen show up. And this is something we'll be talking about later, but I heard from several seniors who were upset and unhappy about the special town meeting logistics, that they felt neglected their special needs. And I hope that we'll be able to discuss this more a little bit later this evening. And that's all.
Okay, great. I have new liaison groups that are meeting soon, so I have nothing from them right now. I didn't know if we had anything from the schools, if they have met yet, Ben. I believe that transitioned to you, but,
School liaison?
yeah.
No, I think
Is that you, Tom? There was nothing. I was hoping to maybe get a conversation on that. Nothing from the regional, the school district?
I have no updates for tonight, yeah.
Okay. You must have a few, sir.
Well, so there are a number of items on the agenda that members had asked us to go over real quickly. So Bridge Street and Essex Street paving, so I got some notes. High points of Bridge Street and Essex Street with paving, block party recap, Chief Guy swearing in, Haddon Park concerts, and maintenance. So let me pull up what I have here so I can. So paving on Bridge Street, it began on June 19th. There are a few driveways that need to be reworked, and then roadway paint. Essex Street sidewalk is complete. They're waiting on MassDOT to pave Route 22 supposed to begin in mid-July. Pete Cobb, the Assistant DPW Director, has been the person managing the project on the ground. Patton Park maintenance, drainage, bandstand. They're waiting on design documents and specifications from the landscape architect to be able to put that out to bid. Electricity has been run to the flagpole, so the cameras there are now powered. And Sean Timmons, the rec department, and the HPD are working to get those, talking to the monitors at the police station. Sunday concerts in the park are managed by the community house. The block party, according to Sean, the block party went well. For their part, they thank the police department for safety, crowd, and traffic control, the fire department for being on site to ensure the fireworks went off without a hitch, and the community house coordinates the entertainment, food vendors, games, activities, et cetera. I think that was everything. That was all the updates that I had there. Did I forget anything, Ben?
Chief Guy swearing in, both Rosemary and I were able to make it. I think that was a good event to be at and to see kind of the passing of the torch, and just a nice ceremony, a good time for the town and for folks to be recognized for their service outgoing and incoming, and to welcome him to the community. So
Essex County DA Paul Tucker delivered the oath of office to Chief Guy, and had some very nice words to say about Chief Stevens and his leadership in Hamilton over the last 16 years.
I saw some of the pictures of Chief leaving the building. That was touching. Rosemary, I think you had a couple others you wanted to add on
Yeah,
to.
sorry, I forgot to add these two things. Just that I attended the Eddie Guy's swearing-in ceremony, and I spoke with him a little bit during the, after the ceremony, and he talked about two of his objectives, which I thought were very interesting ideas. He wanted to get the, first is he wanted to get the policemen doing community patrols on bike, which I thought was a great idea. And then the second thing was to get CIT, crisis intervention training, done for his officers so that they can respond appropriately to, say, perhaps a mental health crisis. I thought that was a great idea. And then finally, earlier this week, I went to the groundbreaking ceremony for the antique fire engine in front of the Public Safety Building, and there were a lot of people there who were very excited about this project, and I certainly am as well. So congratulations, Chief Burnett, for getting that off the ground.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. I see we have a few items, mostly minutes. We approved minutes from the Joint Select Board and Planning Board meeting for April the 29th. Approval of minutes from the Select Board meetings for June 10th and June 16th. Another approval of minutes for a Joint Select Board and Planning Board meeting from June the 24th. And approve the reappointment of Reggie Maidment to a new 3-year term on the Recreation Board. Can I get a motion for the consent agenda?
I move that we approve our consent agenda for July 7th, 2025.
Second.
Any further discussion? I thought we got Reggie last round, no? Did that? Okay,
He was missed.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. 4 people present. All right, let's move into the agenda. Speaking of appointing people, I see an appointment for a Jeremy Foster to fill the vacancy on the Hamilton Conservation Commission. Discussion and vote. I don't know if, Jeremy's in the room or online or care to say anything. A quick look. He's 7.5-year resident of town. Research biologist, I could see that being very helpful. He also worked on the Hamilton Rain Barrel Program this past year.
We did have a letter, I don't have it in my part of the packet, but I hope that you had it. We had a letter from the chair of the Conservation Commission in favor of his appointment. And
I didn't see that. I saw his application.
Mhm.
So his resume was in the packet as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Saw that.
Yeah, no, very, very qualified, great resume, and seems, a good fit for him.
here we go.
He's authored publications in the.
Yeah,
so-
I know. I think they'll be lucky to have him.
So according to this here, the letter of recommendation was from Nancy Baker.
Nancy Baker.
Nancy?
Yeah, she's the new chair.
Open it up here for you.
Okay. So we have 3 openings still. This would be one of them, still looking for 2, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So-
So it is a pleasure to recommend Jeremy Foster for an open position on the Hamilton Conservation Commission. At the Commissioners' meeting on June 25th, Jeremy introduced himself to the Commission, and the Commission voted unanimously to accept his application for a 3-year appointment. And it goes on. to
All
say-
right.
So, thanking you in
Well-
advance for your attention to this appointment.
Well credentialed, the board wants him. Could I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to appoint Jeremy Foster to fill the vacancy on the Hamilton Conservation Commission.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Welcome, Jeremy Foster. Looking forward to all the work that lies ahead and filling out the remaining vacancies in that group as well. All right, looks like we had an amendment to another reappointment of Brian Stein to the Hamilton Development Corp.
Yes, according to a letter that I hope is, again, is in your
Yeah,
packets,
did
that
see that.
if he was accidentally included on there as an associate member or something, he's supposed to, he is and was seeking a reappointment as a full member. He was recommended by the Hamilton Development Corp to stay in that position.
Brian does an outstanding job with that group. Could I get a motion, please, for a 3-year term?
I move that we reappoint Brian Stein to the Hamilton Development Corporation as a full member for a 3-year term.
A second? Anybody?
Second.
Any further discussion on Mr. Stein? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
And that's unanimous, 4-0. Next up, review accessibility and voting clickers, preparation for July 14, 2025 STM with the town manager and I believe Peter Babel of Meridia.
Peter,
here with us to
Peter's
talk about
online, Peter's online.
Okay.
I think, if you don't mind, I'll take a second to kind of frame this out.
Okay.
As Rosie mentioned at the beginning in her remarks, we did have a few hiccups with the special town meeting on June 9th. We had issues where we had tried to designate some areas of seating for people with mobility impairments, and those, unfortunately, we did not do a good enough job maintaining those for those folks. We also had, we also were quite obviously a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of turnout. I know from talking to the clerk, she had sent people out into the line several times to look for people who were with walkers and otherwise impaired and invited them to come up, but obviously we didn't get to everybody. The line stretched down Bay Road, past the front of the high school, and there were people who did not come up to the front and asked to be taken early that did wait in line, and so we've talked with the clerk about how we're going to fix that situation. We also had at least one resident ask for some assistance for people with hearing impairments. We have since, working with Bill Melville at HWCAM, ensured that there will be
Captions.
Closed
captions.
captioning, there you go, thank you. Older age is starting to set in for me as well. Closed captioning included, we now have that technology to be able to do that during the meeting, so all the screens will have closed captioning for the speakers. And people will be able to follow along if they have a little bit of a hearing impairment, or if they have a hearing impairment. There was also some issue with the speed with which the clickers were recording votes. Have Peter here to explain that, but we will say that we had a couple specific complaints. We had Peter look at the issue. It did turn out that all of the clickers that we knew about, that people were concerned that their vote was recorded wrong, that did not happen. For whatever reason, some of the clickers were showing one thing, but the actual recording, Peter had charts like this that showed what each numbered voting clicker actually voted. So in the one case, we had a resident who was able to tell us his actual number on his clicker, and he had voted yes, and he was afraid that it had recorded no, but when we looked at the record, it had actually recorded it as a yes.
What made him think it was a no?
He was pressing the button, and it would say yes, and then it would flip to no. And he had,
On the clicker or on the wall?
On the clicker, but not on
Okay.
the wall. We also know that there was an issue where we had a number of people that checked in. There were more votes than that. That was exactly related to the number of people who went up to get a second clicker because they thought theirs wasn't working. So it does, I'll let Peter explain the details, but it does seem like the issue really was recording the vote on the screen, not in the system. The machines were recording their votes properly, but the the lag in terms of getting them up on the screen, and the screen was constantly rotating. People were not sure how their votes were being clicked. This was, quite frankly, probably an issue with how many people we had all trying to get their votes in at the same time. If you want to let Peter explain, hopefully he can do a better job than I just did. Peter?
Yes, how are you? My name is Peter Babel. I'm with Meridia. We were on site and I was closely examining the specific one keypad. I actually have it here with me, number 41, but also others that were in question. The behavior was reproducible in that environment where we had 1,700 people voting at the same time. It's a lot less reproducible now when we have, the capacity is smaller. But basically, the keypad itself as a device that works on radio frequency, it takes time to send the vote. And the more people are voting at the same time, it takes longer to get that vote across. So the behavior on the display may be such that an individual who presses a yes button or green button for yes may see the number 1, which represents yes, for a while, for at least 15, 20, sometimes in extreme cases 30, 40 seconds. And if they become, either impatient or if they try to change their vote, the changing of the vote is allowed, obviously, during the period of time while the vote is open. They might see that even that takes another 30, 40 seconds. So in the end, when I examined this particular keypad and many others individually, as well as a group, they all performed exactly as designed. When I press 1, it shows 1 on the display and it records 1. We did this in repetition over 100 times on each particular device. Nowhere there was any discrepancy in the vote recorded versus the vote pushed. So all devices worked correctly. The only delay was in the sending time or time to send the vote over to the receiver, and therefore some confusion was only displayed on the screen itself, where it would say 1 and then 2 because the user may have changed their vote back and forth maybe 2 or 3 times, not knowing that it's not going to produce any instantaneous confirmation, visually right in front of them on the display. And that's the bottom line. We have stood behind the technology and have used it, many times in town meetings and other events with large number of people, and the behavior is always the same. It's a little slower than when it's 200 or 300 people in a regular town meeting.
I'm hoping to hear from the select board if you have additional questions. If there's things that we
My
can-
question is, so is it because we have it up on the screen and that's why it's so slow? Is it getting it up on the screen, or is it actually take 30 to 40 seconds to be registered by the system, your system? I guess, is it just because we're using the big screen and showing it up on is that the delay?
No, that display is a computer display. Maybe it's slow because of a graphics card, but it has nothing to do with the sending of the vote. The slowness I was referring to is literally between this device, your handheld device, and the receiver that basically is the antenna that collects all the votes from all of the keypads at the same time. We had, I believe, in that room, in the big gymnasium, we had 2 receivers, if I'm not mistaken, and then 1 more in the cafe or the multi-purpose room. And so that number of the receivers may not have been adequate or had contributed to the slowness. Eventually, we received all the votes. That's not the problem. It was just slowness that was caused by the transmission, not the display.
Is it just adding more receivers in order to speed up that process? I'm just thinking of I don't know who Wenham uses for their town meeting, but it was,
They use the
within 5 seconds, they were given the votes. I feel like it was 10, 15 seconds. They were like, okay, the vote passes. I feel like we were waiting 3 to 4 minutes where they were just, similar amount of people, hundreds of people showed up, and I think they got a little bit quicker. I don't know if it's just receiver placement or number of receivers, but it'd be nice if we could get that. I think people get frustrated when, 3, 4 minutes are passing and trying to move it along.
Yes, correct. We had a very similar experience with very similar number of people in Marblehead. 1,700 people came to that town meeting, and the slowness was right around 3 to 4 minutes initially, and then we eliminated a lot of the Wi-Fi interference in the room with the help of their IT, and it was also in a gym. It was a school system Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi, and we eliminated that, and the time to collect 1,700 votes came down to about a minute and a half. Little less than that.
So I think one of the things to keep in mind is that we've been using the system for several years now. It's the first time we've had this issue. It's also the first time we've run this system in a different venue than in the auditorium.
Yeah.
You all know the auditorium is a big cement box with steel in it, and it's very bad for Wi-Fi. Most of us have tried to send a text during town meeting or get a text, and it's impossible. The Wi-Fi is really bad in there, so there's no Wi-Fi interference with the radio waves that we were experiencing evidently in the gym. So I think that's probably the best explanation for it. We're planning to return to the auditorium and cafeteria for the next town meeting on Monday. So, but it's something that we'll work with the moderator on, making sure that we give ample time for the votes to be recorded. And in this case, we won't jump the gun and say, hey, if you don't think your clicker's working, get a new one. We'll just ask everybody to be patient. And wait till the votes show up.
Do we have, when people grab a clicker, do we have their name, their clicker number? And
Don't usually. We hadn't in the past, partly because that would probably slow down registration, and as we knew from the 9th, getting people processing in the building was taking enough time as it was. The other thing is, part of the reason we went to the system was to be able to protect, to allow people to vote anonymously, and if you're asking for their name and recording with a number, then you're actually getting around that purpose, so.
I'm just thinking back-end controls, right? It sounds like we had clicker jam, right? There were a lot of people going over. You had the receivers in. I don't know if receivers sometimes cause interference and delays, and it picks one but not enough, goes to the other. But I'll leave that up to you guys on placement and how it comes through. But any recommendation on any commentary we should do up front if some people were concerned? On the accuracy of them, or still might have concerns. I'd like them to know we've kind of gone through. We had some clicker numbers. We troubleshot situations. But then I do think that on the back end, and you can tell me, Peter, if there's any reporting versus us giving you a number and going to look that we can get as an output from clicker number to it voted twice and it ended on this or something like that. Is there any reporting at a clicker level that would help us as a back end control? And then I guess, to your point, not for public to know who voted what, but does anyone see value in making sure we capture that? So if we have to go back to it, we can do our own reconciliations. Maybe that's over-engineering this, but if we all feel like it was accurate enough. But I would think it's digital, it's in a system. We could probably get any reporting we'd like, right?
Correct. So I'll take it question by question. One, we recommend for open town meetings anonymous voting because it really, brings up honesty and it doesn't or one doesn't feel pressured by the peers in that environment. It's different for representative town meetings. Obviously, they are always visually identifiable as to who voted how, but not with your form of government. So I would recommend that we keep the anonymous vote. However, I will say that many towns do record the clicker and the name on their, let's say, poll pads or whatever registration system they use, because that information never comes over to us. They are on the internet, we are not. We don't talk to each other. It is a completely different system. Our records, I'll take on a second question you had. It was whether we have a record of the vote. We do, however, we only have a vote of the last vote. Because of the way that the technology works, if I press 1 and then change my mind to 2 and back to 1 and back to 2, I could do that 4 or 5 times. I wouldn't know any of the previous votes. I would only know the last vote that was counted. Okay. So I do have that record for you. what else? My recommendation or the adjustment to the announcement, to the instruction would be simply to be patient. And yes, it does help when you raise your hand with the clicker up and you push the button up in the air. We are made of water and we do absorb that signal. So I've seen people who are voting within the confines of their own body. I would, encourage them to raise their hand and push the button one more time. You can push the same button 4 times. It doesn't really change anything. It just reinforces the signal being sent. Once you see OK on the screen, it is recorded. It is done. And the other thing was I'm working with Thomas Sacco, your IT director for the schools there, or at least the admin there. And I'm strongly recommending that we do eliminate as much as possible the Wi-Fi interference on the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. If Wi-Fi is required for other purposes, you absolutely should have one available on 5 gigahertz frequency, because that does not interfere with us at all. Given the experience we had with Marblehead, where that one act was able to lower or shorten the voting period from 3 to 4 to 5 minutes down to less than a minute and a half just by eliminating 2.4 gigahertz interference. That's a huge help, and we would really appreciate that. And I'm sure your residents would appreciate that as well, because 1,700 people should not take 4 to 5 minutes. The technology is absolutely capable of doing that much, much faster.
So you're working with the district on possibly like shutting that off during the voting?
I have asked for it multiple times. I was denied a few times, so I would appreciate a few more of you to step in maybe and ask for that. And I'm not saying forever. I'm just saying for the duration of the town meeting and only the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. 5 gigahertz can remain open, and as many of those points can remain active. I don't know if this is technically possible. I'm just asking for help in determining what can be done technologically to speed up the voting, so that we don't have that other human element of confusion where I'm looking at the screen as a voter and I'm pushing and I don't know what's happening. And that's only because everything takes longer.
Can we just maybe ask the question of the 2.4 versus 5.0 and the challenges of keeping both? I mean, I understand if they need it. I couldn't get on either of them out there, but but that means a lot of others were. so.
Definitely will ask, definitely ask them at the school if they can turn and eliminate that interference. during the meeting.
And how much time would that save, do you think, from the time someone hits a clicker to a vote? Would that save us during the meeting, roughly?
I only have that generic number where 1,700 people in Marblehead in the same amount in the same type of space, a big gym. They were all voting first for 4 to 5 minutes, and then later on it was minute and a half.
So maybe just capture that.
Great
45
saving.
to a minute and a half.
Yep.
That's significant. Okay, well, good update. I feel.
Do you have any other questions for me about accessibility? I did talk extensively with town clerk about making sure we're making a more concerted effort to get people out of line that need help getting in and getting registered too, so.
Yeah,
Were there
that's-
other things you want to bring up? Because, yeah, that's right, you mentioned this early on.
Yeah, it was very disheartening for me to watch that gym full of people and watch one particular couple. One had a walker and one had a cane, and they had been outside for some time, and I don't think it was any one person's fault. I think it's collectively all our faults, and we need to assure that that doesn't happen again. And I feel terrible about it on behalf of our seniors and disabled people who made a concerted effort to come to that meeting. So I think I'd like to issue an apology to all of our seniors out there who were so utterly inconvenienced and incurred a hardship because they wanted to participate in our process. And I know that we'll make an effort to not have that happen again.
Yep.
Is there any way to pre-register for those with physical impairments or issues that might not be able to stand outside in the weather for periods of time?
So, I mean, again, I do think, Corinne is really good about this, and I think the the key factor that was different was the sheer number of people that showed up and
Right.
where people were online. She's always, Corinne and her staff have always gone out of their way to get people, particularly with mobility impairments, pull them out of line and get them in, process as quickly as possible, bring them around the side and get them in faster. It was just really difficult to know where all of them were in this instance, and people do the right thing. They see a line, so they get at the back of the line, and we need to do a better job. We've put it on the messaging, on the postcard that was mailed out. I believe it says, if you need accommodations, please let us know ahead of time, and we'll try to help you with that. So, basically come to the front of the line, and we'll have people walking the line this time, if there is a very long line, have people walking the line this time to try and make sure those folks get that message as well.
Yeah. I escorted a 94-year-old resident right to the front of the line because I know that she would not have been able to stand in that line. And dare I bring this up, there was special accommodation for families with children. And we can't forget that we're not just families with children.
We get that,
we
yeah.
are a diverse population with diverse needs. And I think if anything, this issue is a huge wake-up call to all of us, that we are a community and we need to give special accommodation to those who need special accommodation, and I know that we will, so thank you.
I'll also say that, we did offer a van, shuttle service with CADA. Unfortunately, after the event, I spoke with CADA, nobody took advantage of that. Several people had called and inquired, but then chose other means of getting. So we're trying to let people know, if you're bringing someone who has a mobility impairment, drive them right up to the front of the
Right
high
to the
school.
front of the line.
Drive them right up to the front of the high school and drop them off before you park, let them get in and get the help they need. We're offering CADA again, hopefully if people will take advantage of it this time. But if you're driving somebody that has a mobility impairment, drop them off at the front of the line.
Yep.
Town clerk has no problem with processing them, getting them in first, so.
I wonder, we have a lot of kids who are from the high school who are trying to do their community service. I wonder if there could be some sort of ushers who are standing at the door to help folks who need some help. I mean, that's a good way to earn community service hours.
Yeah, we can ask, but in the summer, I
Oh,
don't
it's
know
there,
how many
right,
students
right.
are around.
I agree.
But I'll definitely ask Brian if he.
Just kind of thoughts for the future.
Yep, absolutely.
The only other thing, if folks are at home or listening listening to the recording afterwards, if you're at all able, doors usually open early, at least an hour early, so
Yeah, we're
not that
planning to-
anyone has spare time, but if you can come early to help kind of reduce that pressure and that surge, when I'm trying to get the meeting going, so try not to show up at 6:15, because that, I think, was a burden for some folks too, was having to then wait all the additional time as well to
Right.
get things started, so.
We are opening the
early, come
registration
early.
line at 5 again, so an hour and a half before the meeting's supposed to start. But if there are people who aren't going to be rushing in right from work, that want to get there a little early, as Ben says, and help alleviate that time crunch, we'd appreciate it. So, do our best.
Yeah.
Of course.
So should we do a communication as such to remind folks who have, or are handicapped or have?
We've already done some, but I'll ask them to continue to push that out on social media.
Flyers.
And flyers and
Or
stuff.
should we even
Flyers
have something
came
at the
out
table that
this-
kind of has a entrance for people with such needs?
Yeah.
Just so it's visibly,
Maybe, and
I don't
also-
feel like I'm
yeah.
cutting, I'm going, most places you go, right? We'll have either a handicap, for lack of a better placard, but
Yeah.
something like that to say,
And put one back at the corner.
this is okay to come to
as
this
well,
spot.
that's like,
Yeah.
put it, so if somebody's back at the back of the line, they see a sign there
Yeah.
directing them to the front.
We can put a sign on.
Something we can highlight in the paper if there's a story about it.
There is an issue coming out before Monday, so
There
hopefully
is.
it can be highlighted. It'd be great.
That'd be great. I think we absolutely need to, do whatever we can. I mean, we have a lot of people there, and I assure we will, and so that's a good problem, but we have to make sure we're considerate and accommodate, every segmentation of our population. Okay, any further discussion there? Peter, thank you for that update.
Bill Melville's here if you had any questions about the closed captioning.
Bill, I love the screens in the front, too.
Very good.
Yeah, let's do that.
Every,
We're going to do that again.
okay.
Okay, so Bill Melville, 14 Boston Ave, also Executive Director, HW Cam. So we do the captioning in Wenham, but it's to one TV. It's not to like multiple devices. I guess what I'm trying to say is that even if we go with a third party, that's assuming you have internet. And in the gym, I couldn't even stream. So 2 weeks ago, I went to the high school and put in my own private network back to the studio, so I could do the live captioning. And then what we'll do is I have a box that talks to the studio, and 3 seconds later, we get the video with the caption right underneath. And if we have a screen somewhere, I can send the video to that, and people can see it there. The other option is I could pay a company, but that's assuming you get Wi-Fi in the auditorium, which you don't get. So we are paying Boston Sound and Video again, as we did the last time, but smaller quarters. And also I have and I'll talk to the AV people. I do have basically a hearing impaired device. So they plug in the audio, and then I have about 6 boxes with earbuds that people can hear. Okay, that's great.
So that's another option, but I'll get in touch with them about that.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Just make sure your Wi-Fi is on the 5 gigahertz, not the 2.4.
Not the 2.4.
Yeah.
So if we only had one screen that had captioning, maybe we could designate that in,
Yeah, I mean, I can split it, so if, I'm just saying, let's say throw it in the, put it in the cafeteria, but I could split the signal. What I found when we did the meeting where we had those two, the blowout where the cafeteria was full, and we had the smaller room, which I thought was gonna be, where a lot of people congregated there, that would be a perfect room, the one across from the office. Because it's intimate, it's not that noisy, there's not a lot of like overflow and feedback and stuff like that.
Right.
Not to put more pressure on Joe, but
We had a lot of requests for the third room this time, but let me see if we can get it.
yeah, I'm not yeah, but that's a good option. The CAF, I'll make sure to bring 2 PA speakers this time. And also, like I said, I'll talk to the AV company with the earbud piece. But like I said, we just have to figure out what screen we're gonna do the captioning on. And then we can do it there.
Mr. Moderator, do you have a preference? Do you want the closed captioning on the main screen in the main room so that people who want to speak to that are there? Or do you?
Bill Bowler, moderator. I think this is going to be, what I'd like is, a permanent solution, because this is an issue that's going to be, I think these kinds of issues are going to bubble up more, and we need to be prepared for it. So obviously, money's an issue, but if we have to spend some money for going forward, I think that's money well spent. So I think you want people to be, if they have some sort of if they need to have a disability or something, you still want them to be part of the whole as much as possible. And so I get the idea of putting them in a quiet room, but some people may object to that. I think the more we can, integrate it into just the regular town meeting is the way to go.
Okay.
Yeah, so we just have to figure out how to avoid that confusion, because there is a delay. So he'll hear the moderator, and then 3 seconds later, they'll see it and then see the captioning.
If you can let me know what you're gonna do, so I can put it on the Facebook page, or we can put it out to people, this is what you can expect if you have a hearing problem, or...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, we'll be running closed captioning on the main screen in the main room. There is a slight delay of 1 to 3 seconds, so people who are going to be relying on that should be aware of the delay, and we need to be aware that people may be responding a couple seconds late, a beat late.
Yeah, okay, that's great.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
thank you.
Bill, do we ever get to the point, Bill Melville, where we'd either have Wi-Fi or cell coverage or something within a room like that where somebody could follow it on their smart device and
Yeah.
have the caption enabled and they could be like that?
Yeah, so it would,
That's the long term, I think.
yeah, that is long-term. So there is, I'm in talks with a company that we use for our server now, about the new town hall, that there will be in-room captioning. So I'm looking into a device.
That's true.
Yeah, so in the room, and it will be, almost instant, but the device is also $10,000 a year to do that. But,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Good discussion. So we'll just make sure all that comes to fruition. Yeah, for the 14th, we learn from the 9th, and we'll continue to learn as we go through these and get longer-term solutions. So I think now we can transition into the script, for said meeting on the 14th. Any FAQs, presentation materials, reports, motion maker assignments, things of that nature. Do we have something, Joe, you would like us to walk through, or?
Yeah, so there's a copy of the script in your,
Yep.
there is a copy of script in your packet. Attorney Tom McEnany from KP Law is here. The biggest thing we need from the board tonight is designation of motion movers for the two articles that will be discussed at the special town meeting on Monday. There are copies of some of the other materials, the FAQs, which were developed largely by the planning board. In fact, the final version came from Marnie Crouch herself. There's a decision process tree that the planning board developed, and then there's the start of a presentation that will be followed at town meeting. There's some more work to do on that. Mark Connors, the planning director, is working on that with Jonathan Poor and Emil Dahlquist of the planning board to finalize it after a brief meeting today. In the meantime, I think probably talking about who's gonna move the motions. The plan is to have a presentation prior to the first vote about the 3A compliance, and I believe it's to bracket the conversation with the FinCom's recommendation, and then presentations by the planning board and others to include, as needed, the planning director and the consultants, and then close it again with the planning board and FinCom.
So will the
And then
FinCom
have the
speak
have them-
separately or together? Do you know?
I think the FinCom chair is here, he can answer that question, but I believe that the plan was for him to make an opening remark about what the FinCom's recommendation is and why, and then turn that over to the planning board, who will, I believe it's gonna be Mr. Poor who's gonna speak to the planning board's recommendation and why, and go through what the zoning entails and what it doesn't, and have details filled in by staff, and then go back to the planning board and FinCom to just reiterate the finer points and close. Then, at that point, the moderator will open the floor to questions, discussion, et cetera, debate.
Okay.
Bill, you have anything to add? Jonathan, have anything to add? Just trying to make sure I get it all right for you.
No, I know last we met, I know Marnie will not be in town, right? So I believe they identified two folks to get through the report, and then one person, I guess, will present it. I'm not sure who. I don't think it was him, though, was it? Who did you say might do the presentation for the planning board?
John Poor.
John Poor. And we don't have that report yet, do we?
So we're working on the presentation. They've done about 13 slides. We figure the entire presentation will be somewhere between 25 and 30 slides. They're figuring out there may be a slide for this FinCom to speak to. And John McGrath or another member of FinCom will reference their report and recommendations, which is already published. And then the FinCom, then the planning board would take over with discussion of the actual article. So it's, the key part, though, is who's gonna make the motion
Motions for
to
us,
move,
right?
so that we can,
So none of those boards want to do the motion?
it's the board's job to decide who's gonna make the motion. You can have it be one of them. You can ask it to be one of them. The FinCom has made motions in the past, the planning board has made motions in the past. It's up to you.
Okay, well, let's start with the first one. Would anyone like to read the motion? Any volunteers? Or should I assign someone? Or do we think it would be better suited for, one of the FinComs or the planning board?
Probably should come from the planning board, is my thoughts.
I thought that's what we said at the last meeting. I know you weren't at that one. I thought they were gonna read the motions, but I'm not. To me, I mean,
I spoke with Marnie, and I thought she said that earlier this week, over the weekend, she said her opinion was that the select board should do it. But again, she's not going to be there, so I'm not sure what the solution would be.
Is there a chance that I could speak? Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, John's there. Yep.
Okay, Jonathan Poor, 30 Woodbury Street, planning board member. It has been discussed on the planning board that it would probably be more appropriate for the select board to make the motion, especially where the planning board is mostly focusing on the overlay zoning, form-based code, and less so on 3A compliance. And so especially the first portion of it is mainly about 3A compliance. The other thing that I just wanted to mention is it would be helpful to maybe discuss what the makeup of maybe a Q&A panel might be, who might sit on that panel, and how the moderator might manage that process of facilitating the panel being able to answer questions that might range anything from legal questions from town council to planning questions from the planning board to FinCom questions, etc. So that might be worth discussing.
Okay. Notes. Do we have a hard copy of the warrant here? You said it, do you know what page it's on in our notes?
No, I pulled it out here to look at it, but I don't have it in that form. I had it on. It's all here. I just don't know what page it is.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah,
I just found it.
okay.
So nobody's volunteering to read a warrant, an article. Ben, I just saw you raise your hand for one.
I'll do the first one.
All right. So the second article?
I'm happy to do it.
All right, we've got our 1 and 2.
Okay.
Now, will there be opportunity? I know there was a question up at public comment on District 1 and things if house is 50% renovation. Does that get addressed in any of that, or is that a in the weeds specific question, or that, we'll follow up with, I guess, with an answer? But those open-ended questions will be, like, are they in things like that? Should that be an FAQ? Should we put things like that in there to anticipate?
There are some things like that in the FAQs. As I said, the FAQs that were drafted by Marnie and the planning board are almost 4 pages long, 3.5 pages long.
I just want to make sure we anticipate questions,
Yep.
That will help in an FAQ, that might help expedite some of the discussion.
Yeah, I think on the whole, ideas like if somebody sells their house, do they immediately have to become compliant? No, the property is grandfathered as a pre-existing non-conforming use until something forces it to change or the owners want to change it. I don't have an answer on specifics, like similar to the question that was asked at public comment. We can have an answer for that type of question ready for a town meeting. Maybe even able to get it out as part of the FAQs or other information that we're putting on the town website in advance of that. Mark would be
May I weigh in on that?
Yes, John.
Uh,
Sorry.
Yes, John, absolutely.
Okay, so again, Marnie put together a fairly comprehensive and detailed FAQ. Part of the planning board's goal in presentation would be to actually focus on the most frequently asked questions and present the answers as simply as we possibly can. That would actually be one of the thrusts of the planning board's presentation. So the idea would be to, in a sense, be as proactive as we can to answer all the questions that we've heard over the last year and a half. And then obviously there will be questions that probably come up that we haven't anticipated, and that's back to, do we want to set up a panel kind of structure where any comments or questions can be addressed by the panel?
Yeah, that was something I actually brought up in the meeting as well, is, once we're done discussing and we start, having comments, should we put 3 or 4 chairs up there and have the subject matter experts there to kind of tag team with it, with answers.
So the answer, they'll be there, right? So we have,
be
we
there.
have Mark there, we'll have the util representatives there. And so those would be the people most, familiar with it. Town council will be there to answer questions regarding the law. And so they'll all have been there, just made their, if there's questions about the FinCom's recommendation, John and the other members of FinCom will be there. So we have the people there. It's how formal you want that discussion to be moderated, Mr. Moderator. Or if you want to just take each question as it comes, and then the person who's best able to answer the question answers the question.
As you said, the people will all be there. They'll be identified. I mean, I guess it'd be good to identify a point person from the planning board, someone from the select board, FinCom, town council, but whether they need to be all sitting together, I guess I'm agnostic on that. I
okay.
mean, I think,
They will be up there 'cause they're up there.
they'll be there, and I can certainly, I'd say these folks are available to answer any questions, but.
If I may, Joe, my one comment would be that any questions or comments should be, and questions in particular, should really be directed to the moderator.
Right.
And then through the moderator would then be, the moderator would ask somebody to answer that particular question who has the expertise to do so. But it really should not be at a town meeting a back and forth between people in the audience, town meeting members and voters in the audience, and people, either planning board members, town council, whoever. Any comments really need to be directed through the moderator, and that's something that's consistent with how town meetings are always held. So I would not recommend veering away from that, but certainly, as has been indicated, any folks who are able to answer any questions, whether they're legal or more specifically planning board related questions, will be available to answer them.
Yeah, no, I agree, absolutely. Everything would go through the moderator. From an efficiency standpoint, most large meetings would have, instead of up and downs and recognizing and someone gets up, most meetings would have the subject matter experts up there, you recognize the expert, and then it's just quicker.
I mean, I mean, this is probably going to be a hot night. We're going to want to move this along. I mean, we're going to cover all the bases, but
So I think we can manage it as is, unless, Mr. Poole, if you had another thought on the panel. I know you brought it to us here, but I personally like the structure.
The assumption was that obviously it would go through the moderator, but it would just be a matter of making sure that folks aren't sitting way back in the middle of the audience, that they're just close by so we can move the questions and answers quickly under the direction of the moderator. That's all.
Okay. Let's just make sure they're up towards the front of the room and ready to answer questions.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
So we have assigned motion makers. We've talked about the FAQs. Just for everyone in general, are those available somewhere? Will they be? When?
FAQs are
How
on the
to-
website.
Right.
The script can be up on the website, and the presentation materials are being finalized. We're expecting them to be done by COP tomorrow, and then we'll run them. We have to get approval by the moderator. We'll be sharing the FAQs with you and some other materials that the planning board chose that we would like to put out as handouts that people could pick up on their way into the meeting. So that would be, we'll run those all by you tomorrow so that you can approve them or deny them, as the case may be.
Permission to ask just a clarifying comment, since I asked a question, you guys were
Yeah,
talking
no, I
about
think
it?
I can't open. Once I open the door, I've been warned, then I opened everything. So I can't. But I will say, from a financial
About the
implication
warrant
perspective.
question. It's not an FAQ, it's
Yeah.
about the language of the warrant, which is not an FAQ.
Just if you can send me a note, that'd be great. I will make sure I take care of it. But from finance questions and implications, there are no other consultants, no other folks asking things. Anything that comes up, is that from our FinCom or maybe they've talked to Wenham? I think maybe we asked about leverage some things from Wenham or compare notes. I don't know, but what gets input into any financial implication discussions?
You could talk to John, you can ask John about issues related to their
Right.
recommendation.
Just like we did.
We did hire a Mark Fugere of Fugere Planning and Development to do an economic assessment of 3A impacts.
Who is it?
Report- Mark Fugere, Fougere. It was a short turnaround contract, unfortunately, but we were asked in early mid-June to find someone. We were able to find somebody who kind of specializes in economic planning analysis. And according to Mark, he has the draft. There's some things, kinks in it that he has to work through with him tomorrow, and we hopefully will be able to make that available as well online.
Yeah, John McGrath, FinCom. Yeah, we did publish book recommendations. It's on the town website. It does have, I think our point was there's no definitive financial answer to what the impact is. So what we did is we presented a range of possible financial outcomes based on number of students that might hit the schools. And we also put a couple of examples in, a couple of scenarios, just to try to frame the subject and give people an opportunity to kind of think through the revenue and the expenses. We also prepared some presentation slides, which we're going to post onto the FinCom website tomorrow. It's more background and more elaboration on the journey that we've been on, the different aspects of the law. So if one was to read through all the presentation slides, you'd have a good sort of history and then a good set of information. So if people want to take the time to digest that, they can certainly do that. So that information is on the town website. We posted the book recommendations, I think, last week.
I saw that, very thorough.
So anyway, so that's sort of where we stand. I think it's important in the town meeting, I've been asked multiple times to try to frame the conversation for the voters in the room as if they're just hearing it for the first time. So I think it's important to sort of explain where we've been and some of the key topics. So one of the things that the FinCom pointed out was the value of the form-based code and how it sort of serves as a sort of a protective barrier around the 3A. So I think that's a really important point for people to pay attention to. So we highlighted that in our recommendation. So.
All right, appreciate it, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other discussion on the table regarding the script, flow of the show for the July 14th meeting, materials, anything, everything's open. Oh, your hair was blue for a minute. I saw.
Oh, no.
No, your hair blue, not hair.
Yeah.
Okay, nothing? How about
Just
you?
a quick question. We're
Sure.
going to endeavor to start closer to 6:30.
Yes. I mean.
Yeah, how do
we were held up by the number of people.
True, I understand.
To be honest, I'm not anticipating that large a turnout. I know there've been a lot of large turnouts of late, particularly for 3A meetings, but we are in the middle of July. I've heard from a lot of people who aren't going to be here to participate just they're not going to be here. So we return to the auditorium where we're more familiar, where we know we can handle 900 people. I don't expect us to even get that high, to be honest with you. I think we have clickers to do 1,200, but I don't think we're going to need that many.
So that's good. Okay, good that we will strive to be on time. Thank you.
No, that's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up because I had some thoughts on that as well. I mean, first, encourage people to come sooner if they can. The doors open at 5, you said?
Yep.
Is there anything we can do for more stations for bringing people through, or does that add confusion, or?
I can ask the clerk again, but that also comes down to people, right? So her volunteers and poll workers and such have to be in the state to be able to help her work it. I know she's got a crew that she's ready for. She thinks that she's ready, and I'd suggest that barring another 1,700 person turnout, I think she'll be able to handle it. But
Great.
Yeah, that definitely was we waited a while. Were there other issues in the wait, or was it all registration?
It's just registration. We didn't have any other issues.
Okay, yeah, so anything we can do to expedite that process and get people into their seats and start closer to 6:30 would be appreciated.
Because it sounds like there will be a lot of discussion, so we want to make sure that.
It's, you know, and, you know, that's the key too. Like, we expect there to be a lot of discussion in this meeting. There was, you know, I think we all anticipated less discussion at the last meeting because of the topic, and it had already been discussed. This issue has not been publicly debated in the past, so we expect a little bit longer public discussion on the issue, and certainly a presentation. So, you know, starting on time is also a bit of the moderator deciding that, hey, we know we have people in line, but we're gonna get started. Hopefully people can get in, and if he wants to make that decision to start at 6:30, regardless of whether everybody's seated or not, once we have a quorum, they can start the meeting. It's really a kind of a game time decision, as they say.
Obviously, at the last special town meeting, it was, you know, the issue was when we were going to get going. What I think I will do, so people understand, the meeting's posted for 6:30. If you're in line at 6:30, we'll work you through. But I think at 6:30, assuming we have a quorum, I'll start on the opening remarks, and then hopefully people that have gotten there after 6:30 will have been able to get in before we really get into the meat of it, but so that it moves it along a little better than the last time. So 6:30, we'll kick it off.
You could pipe some speakers out down the parking lots. No. Okay, good discussion. Anything else, you know, from the crowd? I hate to, you know, cut people off, but just send me directly a note, and Joe, and get right back to it, especially if it helps in anything as we're preparing, you know, for this meeting on the 14th. We do have on our discussion later, public comment. You know, I'm a big fan of it, you know, throughout the meeting. So we'll talk more about that and try to implement the policy as soon as we can. But in the meantime, as we've said before, you know, we're kind of bound to operating with the 20 minutes up front right now, unfortunately. All right, next topic is approve lease renewals for Cutler and Winthrop School. Discuss and vote. I believe these are all due regardless, right? And a vote was made on the 9th. That was passed for a renewal of one. So why don't you just give us a quick update review of what we're looking at here?
So it was over a year ago that the renewal of the Winthrop School lease for 10-year period was approved by the Select Board, but despite that being approved, it was never actually executed. So the school district had contacted us about having that executed. And as you referenced, the lease of the Cutler School was extended to be 50 years by a vote of the town meeting and on June 9th. And so what you have in front of you is a 10-year lease for the Winthrop School and a 50-year lease for the Cutler School property.
And I think if you look back on that 10-year lease in Winthrop, my name's on it. I couldn't read anyone else's except for Sean Farrell's, but my first stint on the select board.
Yeah,
All right.
it's renewal. That's the same lease, same terms, just renewal.
So that's a renewal, Winthrop, 10 years, and the Cutler is 15 years based on the vote, you know, from the 9th meeting. And had we voted, we had voted Winthrop prior anyway, just didn't execute on the signatures.
Right.
So we're just voting for Joe to sign these essentially?
No,
just to
for you to sign them.
Yep.
Oh, for us to sign,
Yeah,
for us to
sign them,
execute,
yeah.
yep.
Any discussions around either of the leases, the terms, the lengths, conditions? So here's the Winthrop one, dated July 1, 2015. This is the one we're renewing for 10 years. I think everything else is pretty standard and the same, right?
Yeah.
Any discussion? Why don't we take them one by one on the Winthrop School lease?
Take them one by one.
Mhm.
Take them one by one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or unless someone first, we just package them. I didn't know if there was discussion. If there's gonna be no discussion, I'll just package them. I'll start with that, and somebody can ask to pull one out. Okay, so I'll take a motion to approve both extensions of the Winthrop and Cutler schools.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have two, a first, a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Aye. So that passes unanimous. We'll send these around for signature. Make sure these in order. I might have messed it up for you. Okay, we got through that. So we need to schedule, speaking of schools, our friends at the district,
Okay, so just want to make sure I'm not out of order. I'm out of order. Okay.
should I?
Yeah, no, go ahead, go. You go.
Okay,
I'm just
so
out
we
of
need
order.
to schedule a joint meeting with the Hamilton Regional School Committee to fill a vacancy on the school committee. So the Hamilton member is leaving, Trent. His last name's evading me right now, but Trent Honda, and I don't know when, is his last day come and gone, or?
He's
Gone,
essentially
yeah.
gone. He's moved out of town.
Okay, so yeah, he took a new job and a great opportunity for him. He was a valued member of the district, so hopefully we can find a good candidate to replace Trent as well. So,
The school committee has offered to meet jointly with you at your regularly scheduled meeting on July 21st. We had also been thinking about using that night to meet jointly after that with the Community Preservation Committee, and maybe potentially starting, I just want to have all this out on the table, maybe potentially starting a little bit early as the state delegation, our legislators, Bruce Tarr and Kristen Kasner, have citations or awards that they want to present to our departed police chief, and he's agreed to be able to attend that night to receive them. So if we wanted to start at 6:30 and hold that as an in-person meeting at the Miles River Multipurpose Room to handle more people in the joint meetings, all the board's members be able to be in attendance, we could start at 6:30 with a presentation of the chief, move into a joint meeting with the school committee to talk about the candidates for replacing the vacancy or filling the vacancy, and then have a meeting with the CPC, their annual meeting, to update the town, which is always done in July.
So any other business we need on the 21st? I mean, that's post the...
There'll be some other stuff, but those will be the biggest things that would need a vote would need votes on that night. Most of the other things are kind of ministerial, but things that we normally bring to you. Somebody's asked for the ability to potentially put a little free library depot in front of the Council on Aging, for instance. So we'd potentially have that on the agenda for discussion.
Okay, so, I mean, so we got two things. One, starting early. Two, I want to make sure we don't provide a disservice to the joint school committee meeting. I mean, a lot of people go through an effort. Do we have a number of applicants? Have we seen not recommendations, but a list of candidates?
Our board hasn't yet. They're under the terms of the agreement, and as we've done in the past, when actually this is how Mr. Honda was appointed to the board. The applicants apply to the school committee orders them, organizes them. Once a meeting date is determined, they shut off the application period and share the application materials with the board. The boards conduct a joint interview of the applicants, and then a motion gets made to make an appointment. And it is in that case, it is the combined vote of the two boards.
Yep, okay, and they'd be ready for the 21st. I know last time, I think it was for Trent, we had a problem getting a quorum and had to go take a couple shots at this, which was a little embarrassing, so I want to make sure.
They've offered to do it on the 21st. They
Okay.
said that they'd be able to make it, and the chair told me that she was confident that the other remaining members of her committee would all be there.
And logistically, that's a big crowd. Do they show up here, or do we go there?
Well, so we propose to do it at the multipurpose room at the Miles River because it's larger.
Okay.
And Mr. Melville had confirmed that he could stream live from there. It would not be able to have the same functionality of a hybrid meeting like we do here, but there would be a component where people might be able to zoom in, but, Ms. Alaris had noted that the school committee uses an owl, and they'd make that available if you wanted to have that as part of the meeting. But in any case, you don't have to have a hybrid meeting. You do have to have an in-person portion of the meeting, so.
Right.
In this case, you do, so.
Okay. Well, I'll take some comments before I kind of...
So I have a question. Since this is a joint decision, one of the questions that I have is it a joint decision based upon all the individual votes, or is it just the selectmen have one vote and the
It's a joint decision. So if all 11 members are there, because there's only 7 members on the school committee, but there's a vacancy, so there'd be 6 of them and
Okay.
5 of you. And it would be
So it requires
it would require a majority of the,
Is it a 2/3 vote or a majority? I don't remember. We can
I think it's a
figure that
majority.
I think
out.
it's just a
I
majority.
think it's a majority, but
Because if there's all the school committee members are there and they vote one way, they can get their applicant. That's
Okay.
the,
And so then my next question is, do we have any idea, is there a closing date for candidates? And will we receive their resumes and have an opportunity to speak with them before the vote? How does that work?
so the way it worked last time was that as I said, the school committee collected the applicants. They put the materials all together. Once a meeting was determined, they shared all those all those materials
Okay.
with the select board. And I don't believe that there was an organized effort to speak with any of the applicants prior to. I can't speak to what individual members of either board might do on their own, but the business of publicly appointing somebody should be done in the public. So, having an interview with somebody should be done in a public session with all the members there.
Right.
I thought what we did was, between us, we came up with a list of questions.
Yeah.
And then asked someone to read the questions, and they all had an opportunity. Will we do the same thing, or?
Yeah.
I think
So if we have some
Dana's,
questions, we'd like to
Dana
ask.
sent a draft list of questions already. I saw that somewhere.
All right, so I missed that, if it
Sorry.
did. Do we have a draft? I mean, we didn't, I want to give input. I have some questions.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think she was anticipating that, if she did send a list, I don't think she was anticipating those would be the only questions asked. She was just.
I think it was a
looking to start
draft.
conversation.
Yeah.
So,
I'll find it.
I think it'd be a good idea to get a list and then say, these are the 5, or
So
whatever.
you've seen a list of draft questions, Ben? Is that what you're saying?
I thought I did.
I don't think I saw any.
Yeah, I don't think any of us.
I don't recall it. It doesn't mean it's not in my inbox. So,
Find it, I'll send it to Joe, and Joe can distribute it.
any other comments on the time, the day,
My apologies.
challenges
It was sent to us on
from Dana?
July 1st. I missed it, but.
Dear Select Board, is this it?
No,
No.
yeah, it's, no, it went to.
Oh, we don't have
me,
it. You
Vinnie
have it.
Leone, Eric Tracy, Bill, and Ben. I'm guessing Bill as the chair and Ben as the school
Agenda.
liaison. So-
No, I think it was
You just
because
told
I
me you're
helped
not the
set
school
the
liaison,
agenda.
are you? Why
The
are you
reason
gonna-
why is because I helped
School
set the
liaison, so
agenda.
I think
Yeah,
that
I don't
was-
understand. Can we clear that up? Because
I
that's why I
can,
thought
I'll
you were
clear it
too.
up. The reason why this came to me was it was an email chain, but it was specific to agenda items for this meeting that we're having right now.
Oh, yeah, and you were the
I
select
helped-
board member.
I helped Bill Olson
That makes
set
sense.
the agenda for this meeting, and so there were
That's right.
questions about it.
did know, yeah, Bill
We knew
Olson
this was
sent
on
me
the
that.
agenda, and
He
then
did.
I think Dana then replied with the draft
You're good.
question. Okay. Don't doing anything.
I just forwarded it to
Out
you.
of order here.
I just forwarded it
So,
to
yeah, now we have it.
You're off
So
the
we'll add- So should we do an ask where we want to, today is the whatever it is, the 7th, right?
Today's the 7th.
Do we want to provide some questions back as well and integrate? I mean, are we going to have an opportunity to do that?
I definitely think you
Clock's
should.
ticking.
I definitely think you should. If you have
Yeah.
questions you want, send them to me, and I'll make sure that
And
we get
Ben?
them. Please send them to me, and I'll make sure that we share them with Dana and Eric, and we'll try to get the list of questions down to a manageable number, but definitely want to hear what the board wants to ask as well. It's important.
So everybody should have some questions, sorry, and maybe by the end of the week, reply back with a few if you want to add. Go ahead, Rosie.
Okay, I was just going to ask, and the candidates will be there that night for.
On the 21st, yes.
us to ask
The
questions.
part of the process is them to be interviewed by both boards, so.
And then we would vote at that meeting. Okay.
It would be advertised so that you could interview the candidates and have the option to vote. Of course, you could always get to that point and decide that you all wanted to think about it and table a vote to another future meeting, but that would require having another joint meeting. So both boards would need to agree to that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion
is
on
it?
date, time,
Just process question.
process?
Yeah, I guess just firstly, I'm here on the 21st, and 6:30 start time works for me. So just making sure you have a quorum. As far as the process goes, if
Is it a Monday?
It's Monday.
there are multiple candidates and no candidate gets a majority, I don't know exactly, like, I haven't done the math on this, I'm just trying to understand, like if there's 11 people, but there's 4 candidates, like, do we vote on each candidate one at a time until we get somebody who gets a majority? Or like, how does that work? You see what I mean? If we had 3 or 4 candidates,
Yeah.
Rank
and
them?
right, is it a rank vote, or then you'd need some kind of process? I'm not articulating it very well, but I'm just picturing, right?
Is there a tiebreaker? Is that the
So-
select board or is that the chair? I mean, the
So I-
chair of the school
I mean,
committee?
the boards between you have to decide how you get to having a candidate that has a majority of the votes. The last time I think there were only 2 candidates. The last 2 times, there were only 2 candidates, and that wasn't an issue. If we have 3 or 4 candidates or more this time, the boards will have to determine a process, and you can discuss that in the meeting together. What is the process you want to follow to get this, whittled down from 5 to 3 to 2 to 1?
And so, I think that they did set a deadline, though, for applicants, but it's not until, am I reading this right, July 16th by 4 PM. So it's hard to, like,
So that's next,
Wednesday
that's a week from
of
Wednesday.
next week, and then,
And that would only be 5 days before.
Yeah.
So
so
you
a
get,
lot
you
of material, though.
you get all the material, depending on the number of candidates, you get all the material after Wednesday,
Like-
probably on Thursday or Friday in advance of the Monday
Right.
meeting.
Could you, is it just, if it's acceptable, would you be able to reach out to Dana and find out how many applicants they've gotten so far? Because if it's more than 2, if it's 3, then I think we need to have a process, because then it's sort of, you could
My
easily.
understanding, is the most, you do a round table, first you do the interview process, then you go around the table, each person, says who, yes or no, and why. And then you tally them up, someone's keeping score, yes, no. And I thought it was the most yeses,
Right.
And in the event of a tie is the only thing I don't understand, but I might be wrong. It is a good question for Dana,
All right.
to make sure we understand.
I have
it going in.
11
I just
votes.
texted the chair to see if she can tell us.
They're gonna have 11 votes, but if there's 5 candidates, or what have you, right, then you could see.
Most yeses, in the event of a tie, what do you do?
Yeah.
There's bound to be a most yeses, right?
Odds are, yeah.
So,
So whoever gets the most yeses is what we're.
well, he's gonna ask. I think that's good
Well,
guidance.
I mean, I think both
But I think
boards,
that's how it
I think
works.
both boards will need to be comfortable with what that process is.
If it's not already outlined.
I-
Doubt it? Okay,
I don't think
so we'll
it's
get the process. Do we want to tentatively, or just say, because I think it's important when they're telling the deadlines and letting these candidates know, hey, this is the date, and they can be there. I think what I'm hearing is on the 21st, if we leverage an existing meeting, we'll minimize our potential of not having a quorum, because we're already meeting. We'd do a 6:30 start, would cover the CPC annual meeting, would cover the joint school, would start with that, because we're asking people to come in, let's start with that out of the gate, then we can get to any other topics, but I just don't want to cut that meeting short, especially if we find out we have, 3, 4 candidates, if we're so lucky to do that. Does anyone else have a different day, time they would like to entertain, or are you looking for a vote and kind of moving back to the school to get this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that you'll either say that you wanted to try and do the 21st or you don't, because the school's offered to meet on your date, and I think they're trying to accommodate.
Accommodate us. They remember, I remember, we didn't have a quorum, it was embarrassing.
Yeah.
At a meeting, and people came for an interview. And the second time we did, fortunately, but,
I think my only issue is, hope the commuter rail arrives on time, and I would need an extra 5 minutes or so to get up to the school.
Try and get you a police escort. Talk to Eddie about having somebody pick you up and drive you.
I'll pick you up. All right, so why don't we try that, and if you're late, better late than never, right? I mean, by the time we get into it, I'm sure we'll be into it, and if you're not there, we'd probably wait to start that piece. Maybe we order some stuff, but let's, I'll take a motion to hold a meeting on the 21st, starting at 6:30. Primary event, we'll start out with, we'll have the joint school meeting. We'll have the CPC, let that group, put their presentation together for the annual meeting. And we'll go whatever else we can fill in based on, once we know how many candidates will be there.
Yeah.
And you'll also get some background on the process.
Yep.
So can I get a motion for that?
I'll make a motion to schedule the joint meeting with the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee to fill the vacancy on the school committee for Monday, July 21st at 6:30 PM.
Second.
We have a first, a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right. Thank you. That passes unanimously. Do we want to move anything around here? Or are we good to go?
I mean, I
We
think
do
you
have
can,
some-
you can move forward. We have two drafts.
All right, we're good.
Yeah.
Just
I
stay in
think-
order?
Yes, I don't think either one of these need a vote tonight because we're not ready. And
What
next-
about the
Next three things
disposition?
don't need a vote. We have it as a scheduled vote. This is the first time you're seeing this. This was a
Oh.
request. We have some surplus property. We know we've had trouble figuring out what to do with it in the past, so our Public Works Director, who I really like and respect, took the initiative to ask Town Council for a draft policy for how to dispose of surplus goods. We need a select board vote on that, so it is in front of you to consider. And we can vote that at the next meeting or the first meeting in August, whatever you like, and then he can go ahead and get rid of the surplus equipment.
I don't know if people
Based
had
on
a
policy.
chance to take a look at it. It looked pretty good to me. It kind of broke things down from 10K or value or less or over and how that process, the logistics work. Any comment, feedback?
I just
thoughts?
had one question, and maybe Tom can answer this if he's still on. It distinguishes between, I think, under 10,000 and over 10,000. Is that tied to like a regulatory requirement, or is that our own discretion for a number?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. It is. It's in the statute. It's the disposition of surplus personal property is governed by General Laws, Chapter 30B, Section 15. And by statute, there's the $10,000 mark is the threshold for whether or not the provisions of statute apply. And with respect to property that's valued at less than $10,000, the statute provides that it shall be disposed of in accordance with a written policy adopted by the town.
And how do you deem value?
I would say, you'd use generally accepted appraisal practices to determine what the value is. So
It's like a useful life depreciation.
this right. So yeah, exactly. I mean, it's going to depend on what it is, of course, but yes, you would definitely be looking at depreciation in this instance because we're talking about personal property. And that certainly would factor in, but yeah, generally accepted accounting and appraisal practices, I would say, would govern that disposition process.
Okay, and does this have, do we have a lot of items do you see going through this? Are they mostly 10 or under or 10 or over, or is there?
So the good news is if you adopt the policy, or when you adopt the policy, the select board doesn't have to go through the list. It's creating a policy that staff can follow, and they'd follow the guidance from the policy to determine what the value is, and then how they're allowed legally to get rid of it, so.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Like Joe said, it's the first time in front of us, so an opportunity for conversation. Joe can take it back and then come back with something else in the future for a vote.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to see a list of equipment, I guess. See what it looks like right now, and then maybe just a bit of a forecast as well of if there's any major new things being replaced.
I can get that for the next.
What happens if, I mean, it's based on an estimate, if somebody shows up with $11,000 though for something that we thought was only gonna fetch 10, like what happens then?
So Tom, if we assess or appraise something at $9,500 and somebody shows up with $11,000 to buy it, does that change the process, or does that, as long as we had a defensible appraisal, we're obligated to take the highest price we can get, so.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's how I would interpret it. It's generally speaking, the way that the Inspector General's office looks at 30B issues, it's based on what the estimated value is. And as long as the town has a good faith, reasonable estimate, then the IG's office is unlikely to find any kind of a violation under those circumstances. So, you do the best you can with the information you have available and make that determination. I would say, certainly in my opinion, if it's going to be really close, if your appraised value came back at, $9,995, you would probably want to err on the side of caution and follow the procedures for $10,000 or more. But, as long as the town has a reasonable good faith estimate, that's in general would be good enough for the Inspector General's office.
I'll get you a list of what's currently on that, what's currently available.
Yeah, I think just, and any indications as well of like, if there's anything new that's been recently procured or is coming or arriving, and there's some big ticket items, or if there's a
Yeah.
cluster of them, like,
Okay, well, if you think of anything else, just send it to Joe, and, but otherwise, we'll get that list and then bring it back, in the next meeting or second.
Okay. Then,
Okay.
The next draft policy?
Okay, so I think we had a draft policy up there a meeting or two ago. I don't think we've received any other comment, but I really want to discuss this one and really get us out of the kind of interim track we're on right now. So I guess I'll take some feedback, from around the table relative to, the documents that we have. And then next steps relative, can have some open discussion about that, but how do we kind of bring this to closure, in the month of July or so, where we come out of it with a policy that we'll adhere to and go forward. What are we missing? What do we need to do that? Any comments on what's in your document right now?
One of, just some general thoughts about it. I mean, obviously, I don't think we have ever had the type of response to some issues in town that we've had regarding the school consolidation or 3A. Those are really, really hefty emotional issues, and I think people came here because for the longest time, they'd been told that they can be heard here in the select board meeting. Now, with that said, you can't have a meeting that's totally out of control either. So my comment would be, just because we've always had a question and answer period before the meeting, at the start of the meeting, and people could comment on issues not on the agenda. And then we've always had, in my recollection, we've always provided opportunity for residents to come up and discuss issues as we discuss them as a board. And I think that my opinion is that residents offer a very good information that contributes to the conversation, and I would hate to see them stifled by a very closed policy that doesn't allow for some flexibility depending on the circumstances. Tonight is a very low-key discussion. I think that my opinion is it would be great to have the old or previous policy in place tonight so that we could listen to residents and we could contemplate what they're saying, not necessarily to have a back and forth, but at least to listen to people at the time the issue's being discussed. And so I am just a little worried that the recent acrimony in this room is going to dictate policy forevermore, and I'm not sure that I think that's a good idea.
So I'll comment as well, and I agree with Rosie in the sense of, this is my second term on the board, and, my first term, I think we were very engaged with the public. I think we've always allowed people to come up and speak to us, ask questions. We've engaged with them, and that's something that always surprised me as a board, because I thought when I've seen other meetings, it was more public comment and people listen, and I thought that was great that we engage with the public. And I think that's a key component of what we do, is to be involved with the public and hear from them and engage with them, making sure that they're informed. So I do agree with you on that. I think that's a key part of our role on the board. I think where my concern with sort of the approach of, having discretion about, certain topics, if we want to open up to public comment or certain meetings, I think from the citizens' complaint that we received and the subsequent opinion from town council, I feel like it's, you can't just turn it on and off is the impression that I got. You can't just say, okay, well, we're going to allow, public comment for this, and then we're not going to allow it. It seems like once you allow public comment, it's sort of, you have limited authority to sort of, put some safeguards or some kind of restrictions around it. So I fear that you know, we either sort of put in this policy where we have, you know, sort of some strict guidelines of like the first 20 minutes, you know, this is what we're gonna do, we're gonna listen, or we continue on the path where we were, where we sort of just, you know, open it up for everything. I think the more we try to find a way to squeeze the middle, we're gonna run into these continuous complaints. So I think it's kind of one or the other, and I think what we saw from, you know, going the other direction of just allowing whatever, you know, whatever comments at any, without any sort of constraints on them, is that, you know, we, you know, can run into a number of long meetings, we can run into, you know, just you know, shouting matches back and forth, and, you know, especially on emotionally charged items. So I think my impression is, you know, what I've seen from this process with the complaint is that I think we have to, you know, sort of dial it back and put in some restrictions so that we can sort of protect ourselves as a board to make sure that we're not running afoul of any mass laws, open meeting law. So that's sort of where my position is.
I would just add a comment that, isn't it individual? And Tom, maybe you would have, McEnany, maybe you would have an answer to this. So if it's a low-key meeting, there's no reason to put any restrictions on comments and have the public talk to us when we're discussing particular issues, as we have done. And if there's a large crowd and we anticipate very
Robust, maybe?
robust. If we're expecting robust comments and there's a lot of annoyance for the issue, there's a lot of emotion tied up in it, can we impose those restrictions at the beginning of that particular meeting? So that's a question for Tom, if that's all right if I ask.
Yes, no, that's fine. So it is actually addressed to some extent in the policy under Roman numeral 3, number 6, where it talks about that issue. The concern that we always have with respect to that type of decision making is that if the more discretion essentially that the board exercises in terms of the subject matter of a particular discussion, the more it opens up the board to a potential claim. So, you know, what the First Amendment essentially allows is for content-based regulation. So you can regulate the time, really kind of the time and the manner of the speech, but you really can't regulate what people have to say. So if you're going to allow public comment on certain topics, but not on other topics, then that could be construed as a potential issue if, you know, for example, it was only viewed as items that were favorable to the board, or the board only wanted to hear from folks on a particular side about a particular issue. So that's always the concern anytime that you start going down that road where decisions are made based on the content essentially of what will be discussed, as opposed to if it's just more of a more black and white, if you will, policy, just in terms of the time, place, manner of the discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I think that was kind of, you know, where I was going, and sort of understanding, you know, with that discretion, you know, obviously we could run into challenges both from a legal perspective, but also just from like a, you know, from a transparency perspective, from a, you know, public engagement perspective of like, we're now choosing the topics which we think the public should weigh in on. And, you know, based on, you know, what's the process that we're following to say, oh, just that we think this might be a controversial topic? You know, what if there's like, you know, for instance, tonight we have the regional 911 discussion. You know, what if that was something that we didn't think was going to be a controversial topic, that everyone was going to be one side of that issue, right? And we didn't open that up for public comment. And then we had a number of individuals show up, and now we didn't put it on the public, you know, comment as an open meeting. So like, we're trying to forecast what we think, and some of those we know. We'll you know, the school, you know, consolidation issue. Yeah, we'll know that's a controversial topic. But we don't know every item, and so I think we're going to be, you know, constantly second guessing ourselves. And then I think it renders this policy almost useless, because we're going to have to essentially open up every meeting for public comment. And so we're essentially back to square one.
I'm just, like, what is square one, though? I mean, I think we're managing to an extreme in a way here. We've had two very contentious-ish topics that really brought us to where we are. I bet if we went and looked back, I don't know how many times we've been confronted with a complaint like that. In my years of being on boards in this town, 10 years ago, I mentioned I was on this board, I chaired it. I had allowed comments throughout. I chaired the school committee, I allowed comments throughout. And we really never had those issues. We had some tough issues. I mean, back when we moved graduation, that was one of the issues, We filled the room, but we organized it, we put guardrails on, we had time limits, and we allowed for input. I understand, though, that a board, we have to run a meeting, and it's in public, right? All the words around it, and but I learn a lot, when I get comments along the way, and I think it makes us more efficient by hearing things. But how do I manage that? Where I've also seen the line go around the corner, I hear the same thing 5 times, and then when you shut one down, how do you manage an efficient meeting where you're getting input along the way that helps this table make smarter decisions, right? But timely decisions. So I agree 100% with Rosie on this. Could we set up a guardrail in that we're given 20 minutes now? Do we say, okay, up front there's 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and it's going to be, things not on the agenda, and then there are opportunities, but we put the guardrails around it where it's not repetitive, it's timed, it's only, and Tom, I know you're cringing back there probably, because this is where it gets gray on us, right? And this is where the opportunity, and this is where the anger comes in, and then we get complaints, and it happened on this side of the table, and as well, and I'm so sorry you felt the way you did, Rosemary, and I look back and I just want to be able to control going forward, whether it's from that side or this side, everybody has a voice and we should listen, but how do we manage that listening process so that we can learn more to make informed decisions? So I would be a fan for that. I just don't know how to make that a policy in public and protect and make sure we run an orderly meeting and get through the information, because sometimes, you dig too deep and you hear too much and you never get to a decision. You get down that rabbit hole, right? That's happened many times as well.
Yeah.
And in some ways it's kind of this 3A stuff. The fact we've never had a discussion with the public on it is a little bit it's troublesome to me that it's all coming out on the 14th in a big room. And there should be a lot of debate and discussion. Maybe we could have softened it along the way a little bit, but I don't know how to make that a reality, though. I don't, because I get both sides. I understand.
That's where I struggle too, because I feel like that's operating within the gray area, and I feel like the gray area is where the risk is, right? And so and I think at the end of the day, we have to look at, okay, it's a risk analysis, right? So what's the real risk? And maybe Tom can weigh in on this. Is do we risk another open meeting law complaint? And what is the penalty against the board if we sort of did something to limit limit some sort of speech in the future, not intentionally, but maybe we were like, okay, we're just going to limit it to X or something like that, and maybe we get maybe we do something like that and we limit it, and then we get another complaint because someone's unsatisfied with that. What is the risk that we run into? Is it a letter from the Attorney General saying that we can't do that anymore? What if we actually restrict content and then we face a lawsuit, right? Then we're looking at potential, financial penalties. But I mean, is it going to get to that point? Is it worth accepting that risk to hear from the public? I guess that's where the risk analysis lies. And right now, it seems to me like it's black and white. Either we restrict it or we don't, right? And if we operate in that gray area, we have that risk. And I guess as a board, we need to say, what is our risk tolerance? What are we willing to accept as a risk? And if that's operating in the gray area, then we can decide that. But we just have to know that there is potential.
Well, that's a good analysis. My feeling is it's better to operate in the gray area and rather than restrict the public from expressing their views to us. I think that's an important part of what we do, and this is why so many people come here. It seems to me we could put reasonable boundaries on this, maybe a time, if there are lots of people here, such as there were that night, maybe the constraint is not content, maybe the restraint is, we have to get through our meeting, so we can allow 20 minutes for comments on this particularly contentious issue, and then we're not choosing one side over another. We're choosing to have a reasonable amount of conversation that would still allow us to go on with our meeting.
So, so how do we like bring something together? Maybe it's two somethings, and maybe Rosemary, you know, maybe if you want to help and kind of like, what would that look like with guardrails and constraints, along with, you know, Joe working with Tom on what's our risk tolerance? Have we had such a complaint before? I mean, are we managing to an extreme?
But I don't know about prior to that.
I mean,
I-
there've been some really, really contentious issues, and I think that's just the reality. I mean, yeah, and people wanted to be heard. I mean, really, it was a very stressful meeting, but
So we've got two posts, right? We're either thinking we stay within the lane of allow an amount of time up front, and you can make that time, you know, with a cap of 3 per, but talk about anything on the agenda or not, right? And we had an example tonight, somebody wanted to clarify something, would have probably been nice to hear that, but, you know, because they didn't know they were gonna clarify, because they didn't hear the discussion, we didn't take it, so now we gotta maybe get an email, and then we come back, and that sets us back 2 weeks, right? If it was something that was pertinent on there, who knows? It could have been, it may not have been, but still, those are quick booms, right? You know, if we have that opportunity in a meeting to do it. So I don't know if there's a way to say, yep, you know, this is what it would look like with just upfront 20 minutes on anything. And then maybe this is what it could look like, what's our tolerance level, our risk tolerance level, and this would what we would allow with guardrails on topics. I don't like the whole pick the topic, only this one. I think it has to be, you know, opened, but then it's maybe, you know, the first 3 people up, the first 5 people up. I don't know, something where,
I don't think it can be number of people. I think it would have to be a time limit. You'd have to say,
Okay.
so I think what you have in front of you is a draft, just to get this conversation started. What we need back from each of you is what you propose is changing, propose to change, and how you would think it could be changed. We can have another discussion after those changes are incorporated, and then you can choose to either vote on them as changed or make additional changes. The purpose of giving you a draft wasn't to say, here, this is what you should vote on. It was to get this engagement with the board. I do think that there's also, though, a difference between answering question and engaging in a public comment back and forth, right?
Right.
So I think, you know, if any of you has an idea for how to differentiate for that, that might be helpful too. But again, we should always, all the time, be encouraging the public to reach out with their questions at any time. It doesn't have to be at a meeting. And actually, I get lots of questions over email, and I generally think I'm pretty good about responding back. In fact, one of the questions that was asked tonight was asked to me by a different resident via email, and I answered that question already. You know, that's a venue too, to participate with government and ask questions and get answers. But, you know, the point is, the select board meeting is a business meeting for the board to conduct its business and make decisions and debate things. You can invite people ahead of time, FinCom chair, the moderator, to participate in that conversation as other decision makers in town or as other, you know, interested stakeholders. But it's the board's job to make those decisions. So you need to figure out how you have that conversation. Get the information, the input that you need to help you with your decision, but ensure that it's the board making the decision at the end, not being influenced too heavily one way or another based on who's in the room on a given night.
Right. And maybe, just as another thought, maybe we could allow some public comment during each of the issues, should people decide to do that. Make it time sensitive. And then secondly, we would just make it a comment section, a comment session instead of a back and forth. I mean, so that people are allowed to give their thoughts on something, and we wouldn't be obligated to, as you say, do a back and forth. So it would just give us more information to think about as we make our decisions.
So if the board members want to, I'm two of you are attorneys. I think
I mean,
that
I'm
you'd be
just like struggling like
qualified.
operationally how it works for like, because, I mean, we, say we open up, right now we have 20 minutes at the beginning of the meeting to allow comment, right? Do we now have a time limited, slot for each topic item? Do we have it at the end of each topic? Like, you know, to give the example, you know, that you raised with Ms. Stafford coming up to ask a question, like that technically wouldn't, you know, would that have fell within the allotted time? Like, what if that question she thought of after the 5 minutes before a topic was, you know, discussed? Now she wants to come up and ask a question, which you find, obviously would find, say you would find useful. That might come out of the 5 minutes that we allotted to that particular topic. You know what I'm saying? So like, I feel like we're gonna end up allotting all these different time slots to each topic. We're gonna extend our meeting to midnight, you know, just because we're allowing different sections. And then if we don't allow for certain time limited, we're basically opening up for a free-for-all. So I guess I just don't understand how we can procedurally allow it to happen without sort of opening it up completely. I don't see how we can say, okay, 20 minutes at the beginning of the meeting, 10 minutes for this topic, 10 minutes for this topic, 15 minutes for this topic. We're gonna have 45 minutes allotted to public comment and questions throughout each night. I don't see where.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong in that. I mean, again, but I also think we're basing all of this discussion on a couple of topics that have been, you know, we've been many years as a boards in this town that it hasn't been an issue, right? And it's been smooth, and we're lucky to get a person sitting in the room. So I don't like to manage to extremes either. But you got me thinking one thing. Yeah, all those spots and slots are time consuming. Maybe there's one at the beginning, one at the end. You heard a lot tonight.
Yeah.
You know, and then you gather some thoughts that way. Maybe it's 10 and 10, and it's bookends type
Or
of
at
thing.
the end of each.
At the end of each
Yeah,
does make
5
it to
minutes
what
or
his
something.
points. So I don't know, but if somebody wants to take an option B and look like what that looks like, what I'm trying to do is really like not just kick the can down the road. I want this thing, you know, it's been out there a little bit. Let's kind of like come back with either what we're operating under today and bless it and vote. Or if somebody has some other thoughts and ideas, you know, like let's get that and maybe it could be edited in and here's a view that to think about. And if that gets slotted in, you know, we've got two options and we can, you know, have a full board with Bill here as well and kind of make a decision going forward.
And just, you know, one more point, Bill, because I mean, I know you said, you know, this, you know, it's never been an issue in the past, and you're right. Like, I mean, at least the 4 years that I've been on the board, like, it hasn't been an issue, except now it is an issue.
It is,
now.
right.
Now it became an issue. And so now, I mean, we can either, you know, just continue doing what we're doing until we get another complaint. And then now we're blatantly ignoring, you know, the first complaint and we didn't do anything about it. Now we have two complaints and we didn't, you know, rectify the issue. So again, it goes back to my whole risk analysis of like, okay, is that, you know, is the public engagement that important that we're willing to accept that risk? And maybe it sounds like it is, right? But I just think we need to be honest about that. Like we're operating within a gray area where we're exposing ourselves to potential risk.
Would the board consider building into its schedule public engagement nights, so that instead of being a full board meeting where you have business, you could have kind of open forums where the board tries to all be there present, and we take, we take comment, and I'm just trying to help you guys spitball some ideas. I'm not really trying to sign up for an extra meeting a month, but I would say that, or a quarter or whatever it would be, but you could look for opportunities to engage more frequently, more fully and more frequently without it being a part of a meeting. It's a possibility, or at least identify topics that you would want to do that about maybe once a quarter or something like that, where you'd have a set aside for an hour and a half a night where you'd say, we're gonna take input from the community on these 3 topics because we think they're really important. We want to know what you're thinking. And to do that once, you know, every 3 months or something, because that would be a way to get and to actually encourage people on both sides of an issue to come out and know that they're going to be heard, as opposed to.
I think that'd be great. I mean,
But
have like
it's
a
just
little
an
bit of
idea to
structure.
help with
The
that.
structure of that as well, you know, and having it, there would need to be some sort of a moderator. I think the challenge, right, when we end up walking that risky tightrope of the back and forth, you know, or trying to move things along, I think that we'd have to understand what a structure would look like and who's moderating it, not the select board, I would suggest. I would say we're there to listen, you know, maybe like through council or something, you know, if we wanted to ask a clarifying question, you know, it's sort of, but we need a structure around the select board and the open meeting laws like that a lot, like, so that there's a bit of a moderation process happening. I think that some people want to hear, you know, they have questions and they want to hear answers, like from us or from somebody. Some people have comments, they just want to know that they're being heard. So there's different types of formats, but I don't want to see us end up back on the tightrope again, where we're trying to have what we feel like is a reasonable discourse, but it's starting to get outside of the operating limits of what we're here to do.
I can think about who we might enlist as a moderator.
Okay.
You looking at me?
Are they still in the room? Or?
I was just going to make a comment that as we're discussing an issue, seems like the time when people are here and would want to make their comments. And I agree that we shouldn't be having a back and forth. It's a better policy to just allow people to make comments about something that we are discussing. And that way you don't get into a back and forth, and it is easier to set boundaries, time boundaries on that. I think it's important that people be heard because they've come to listen to this particular issue. It's something that we're going to need to make a decision on, so why not have the comment period at the time when we're discussing it? I think that's when people are most invested, and I think as a decision maker, that's the time when I most want to hear all sides of something. So, I don't know.
Yeah, my earlier comments were more in the debate discussion. Tell me why it's more like providing something that might steer the discussion in that it's a corrected fact, or I know this about this topic or that. I've been looking, you know, we're leveraging our due diligence by people who have been looking things up, right? But I know that's great. And, you know, some of the things we've done, and I doubt we could do this, is we have like Q&A chat lines in large meetings. So you can see stuff coming in on the facilitators when on their board, and you can just be like, oh, okay. But you're not really responding and answering. Often what we do with that, we dump them into a file, and then we answer questions and send it out to the audience.
When you say we've done, you mean in your professional life?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, to clarify. Like,
Just clarify.
in a business
That's
setting,
not something that we
in a
do.
business setting, when we've got, you know, hundreds of people out there, and we're presenting out or talking, you know, there's Q&A chats coming, you can see them in your eye, and then you've got people managing the questions. Not real time to send out, but if a facilitator sees it and wants to hit it because it'll solve something, they move with it, you know, and then those all get dumped and answered and sent out after meetings. But I'm sure there's a violation in there somewhere in a public setting. So, but anyway, I think my goal here in managing time here as well is, you know, we've been operating under a new structure, and it hasn't been terrible. We're getting information. I think we're missing information timely. Hopefully people do follow up and send information that gets baked into the next meeting, but often that just, you know, delays decisions, you know, because you don't have everything, all the answer up front. If there's a way to put guardrails and I know that's the gray area we all keep coming back to. But I think we need to kind of solidify a path. Maybe there is a second option if somebody wants to throw it out there, working with Joe on, hey, these are guardrails I think might work or not. But either way, maybe come back in a future meeting, we'll say when soon. We either, you know, formalize what we're doing now, or we have one more discussion about something.
Yeah, I think we should have another discussion. This is interesting.
So is there something you feel like you want to put into, that you feel guardrail could provide for a structure that wouldn't go awry?
Well, I hope so. I think putting time boundaries, but have it contemporaneous with the issue we're discussing, that we will not have a back and forth, will not respond. It's a comment period. If people have specific questions they want an answer to, then they can email us. So I think there are lots of ways we can do it while still allowing maximum public participation.
So if you want to share some of those thoughts with Joe, you can formalize it into a discussion. I think I know where, Tom, you are, right? And I understand it. You know, I think, so I don't know that you would have other thoughts. I think you're probably steering towards what we're doing. I'm guessing, I don't know. I don't, Ben, if you had other thoughts, I'm not sure, sorry, getting over a cold. But I'd like to come back with a, you know, for the next meeting and have Bill here and then kind of just come up with a policy and we'll work. But we can always edit and change and move on the fly if we're, we something
Just to
that doesn't.
clarify, for the next meeting on the 21st or for the?
That one's gonna be pretty busy with the
Maybe
school
August
stuff,
third.
so,
August
but
fourth meeting?
so I'm thinking, you know, by the one after that. Does that sound like a plan? Any other discussion?
I think that's doable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And honestly, there was a lot to read tonight.
Yeah,
I
there was a
skimmed-
lot to read, I
I
didn't,
skimmed through
I
this.
didn't plan on sharing it either. No, I'm kidding. All right, so let's move along, because we do have people in the room, and I'm sensitive to that. So we talked about the public comment policy. So let's get into the feasibility study. Let's have our first discussion here, just about, you know, what's out there, what's being, you know, what discussions have you had with our team here? What are we hearing in this feasibility study? How do we break that down? How do we look at this and, you know, on an ongoing basis now on, you know, what's in front of us, whether it's cost that was brought up earlier or quality of service or such. You know, I agree with a lot that was said earlier. You know, that is part of our public safety. It's part of our small town feel. Fortunately, unfortunately, use that call, you know, dispatch center. They would know my family and things were done, and that was a comfort level for my family as well. Communication, you know, we just talked about communication, right, is the fundamental infrastructure on everything we do, and that's really the communication channel for all of our public safety, first responders, things we do. I want to make sure we get it right, and we look at everything, and we have, you know, everybody, we understand it before we make any such big decision going forward. So tell us what we got here.
So you have in front of you the feasibility study. I've been asked to provide you some additional information that I've requested from North Shore 911. So that includes their, they have annual reports and that we've got access to that I'll be sharing with you shortly. The purpose of tonight's discussion was to introduce the topic into the public debate and to the public consciousness. This is something that has been looked at in the past. Quite frankly, it was looked at when the REC, under the old name, it was known as the Regional Emergency Communications Center, and it was initially managed by the Essex County Sheriff's Department. That structure's all changed, and there were huge number of problems with that system when it was embarked upon. As we do with everything, we're always looking to find ways to be more efficient with taxpayer money. And it was brought up to me that we should look at it again. So we engaged with E911, North Shore 911, to conduct the feasibility study and put this matter before the select board for a full discussion, which we know will take more than 1 or 2 meetings, probably takes at least 3. The result of the study on E911 side was that the board voted to ask Hamilton to join. They called me right after we got the feasibility study and asked if I thought the select board would be ready to sign an inadmissible agreement within 2 weeks, and I said no. Actually, I laughed and said no. I pointed out that there was still a process that had to be followed here, that we needed to get the board to understand what was in the feasibility study, what the risks were, that we needed to have a conversation with our dispatchers union that manages the station. We've opened up that conversation. We've had an initial meeting with the members, and just as they did tonight, they expressed to me their concerns, and you know, we talked it out, and we'll continue to talk. We're looking at everything, as we always do. The board, actually, I don't think the town ever, even with the board in the past, didn't even wind up voting on it. It was not recommended by the chief at the time to go forward. But, you know, a lot has changed in 10+ years, almost 15 years. The center is a lot better run. Is it perfect? No. This is not being introduced as any kind of a criticism or indictment of what we have. It is not at all. If money were not an issue, I think that we have good dispatchers in place. But when we look at managing town programs and services, we don't look at based on who we have in positions at a given time. You shouldn't make a decision about how you want the town manager to function in the town of Hamilton based on me. And that's not what you did. You wrote a policy and adopted a bylaw to create the position and give it certain duties, and then you hired somebody to fill those duties. We're going forward, looking long-term at how we manage all of our town services. There are not a lot of services that we could outsource in this way. There just aren't. We've done that with others, smaller things. We've done regionalized smaller things, and they've been a benefit to us. This is something that we put in front of the board to consider, and we move forward based on all of the material after all the conversations are had, and the board makes a vote. So this is just the initial look. As I said, we have some additional information that we're coming to. The public comments situation aside, the dispatchers union could be invited to participate in a conversation with you. They could designate somebody to speak on their behalf. They could all be here. The idea is to talk with them, to talk with others. I think there is representatives of the E911 board that would be willing to come and speak with you as well, answer some of your questions. The idea is to have a full discussion, investigate everything, as Bill said, and then see where that leads us.
So the dispatchers union, is that, how many employees in the?
There are 5 full-time and 2 part-time, 4 full-time and 2 part-time, 6 people.
And like a subset of that is the union, or?
The union represents all 6 people.
Okay.
But there's a president of the union who, or that person could designate somebody else to speak on behalf of the union.
And what about other stakeholders, chief of police, chief of fire? Any discussions with, Russ upon, I know he left, I see Ray in the room, we have a new chief, discussions with them on, as really the customers here, right? Is it from the,
Yeah.
who's communicating through and first responding?
So the police chief and the fire chief had to sign off on the feasibility study being done. We know that Chief Stevens was and is a great defender of the local 911. He was a big fan of it. He and I have looked at, over the 7 years I've been here, many ways to try to make that more efficient. We've tried to bring other towns into our dispatch. We've looked at maybe just partnering up with one other and sending our dispatchers to one other town. None of those work the same way this does, because they all still involve a large cost. The cost of transitioning to that other entity, and then there'd still be an annual operating cost. So this is different in that way, but that's not the only most significant difference. It is a difference. It is something that has to be a part of the conversation. The gist of the feasibility study is that, for the most part, the cost of transition would be handled by the Regional 911, and the annual operating costs would be handled by Regional 911. The town of Hamilton would no longer have an operating cost for 911. Questions about whether or not that is a sustainable model going forward. The state has changed the way they fund the Regional 911. Every single person in the state who has a cell phone, pays a portion of their tax into a fund for 911. And the state 911, after the legislature enacted it, has dedicated a percentage of that tax that gets paid on every phone bill every month to just support Regional 911. Not to support all PSAPs and all 911s, to support Regional 911. It's been an ongoing priority of the state for better than a decade to reduce the number of public safety answering points in the state of Massachusetts. This isn't not new territory. The state of New Hampshire has 1 PSAP for the entire state. The state of Massachusetts, when I started working on this issue with NMEPC 15 years ago, had something like 250. So I'm not saying that you have to do this, but you should know what all the costs and benefits are, and make the determination based on all the information that we have available to you.
So the state of New Hampshire has 1?
And that everything gets dispatched out from one public safety. Every call, 911 call in the state of New Hampshire goes to one spot, and it gets distributed out. California has 4.
How does that work in New Hampshire? Any analysis of the effectiveness?
I mean, I haven't done a deep dive on New Hampshire's 911, I haven't.
Just their perception, just their records, their analysis.
Their perception is that it works. Their response times are reasonable, and the response times that are at the regional 911 here are not that far different from what we have locally. You do lose some local knowledge. But, you know, and I don't like getting into just using anecdotes, but anecdotally, the day last fall when I toured the regional 911 to see how it operated, while I was there, a call came in from somebody in Wenham reporting a brush fire. It was near the Topsfield line. The dispatcher taking the call in this side of the room was inputting the information. And while they were doing that, the dispatcher on the other side of the room read that information, identified that the closest fire truck to respond was actually in Topsfield, and had that truck leaving before the call taker was even done with the call.
And I
That's
think-
the idea of the way they want the 911 to work.
And there's GIS systems that really
Right.
help. Right.
So again, this is not a criticism of what we have, but what we have is one person working in the room, and they do an excellent job. I'm not degrading that. But we can never afford to move past that. The town of Hamilton won't grow large enough to have a call taker and a dispatcher working together side by side on every call. Some communities are big enough that they have people that focus on police and public safety and public works, and then just somebody dedicated to fire and EMS. We'll never have that size. We'll never be able to do that. Our ability is to have what we have right now. And that means if we have a dispatcher that's out sick for a prolonged period, everybody in our dispatch center is also working overtime to cover those shifts that person would normally take. So forced overtime happens here too. It's not a criticism, it's just the reality.
So there are lots of things to consider about
Yes.
this. I mean, I think we're looking at this option based on financials, is that correct?
No, look, it's one of the things that brought it up to me. It was reason it was mentioned to me to ask me to look at it again.
Right.
And it will be an important part of the conversation, right? There are a lot of great things about our dispatch.
Right,
At the end of the day, what is that worth to you?
yeah. I'm just raising the question. I mean, it's a very interesting topic of conversation, because part of what makes a small town is the cohesiveness and the ability to walk into the communication center, and there's always, the times I've been there, there's always somebody there to answer a necessary question, provide resources, and so forth. So, and now, I think the local towns that have not regionalized are, to my knowledge, Ipswich and Gloucester, and I'm just wondering if there's been a conversation to try to bring either of those towns into.
Yes. Well, not with Gloucester. Gloucester would have been wanting to bring us to them.
Okay.
And it's the same thing with Ipswich. Ipswich didn't want to give up its local, and they said that we'd be welcome to join them. But then the cost would be borne by us to transition there, and then we'd have to pay them instead of paying our own dispatchers.
Because that wouldn't be considered a regional.
It would change the way the state allocated money from the 911 fund.
Okay.
So it would still be considered a regional dispatcher, but it wouldn't be a state regional dispatcher.
Okay, I understand, okay. And then just sort of thinking about community, I think about what would happen to our 911 reverse 911 calls.
So it's referred to as reverse 911, but it really has nothing to do with the 911 system.
I know.
So we use Code Red, and we continue to use Code Red. It operates on a different platform. It operates with information
We
put in.
could continue to do that.
And while our dispatchers do occasionally push out some of those messages, we have members of police, DPW, and fire that are all capable and certified to be able to send out messages on that system as well. So
Okay.
it's not required to have a dispatch to use that system.
Okay. I know there's sort of lots of things to think about. I look at the emails that we received today, listening to some of the involved people here today. There are a lot of questions. This certainly isn't an easy decision.
Fortunately, we don't get to only make easy decisions.
I know.
Well, you
So-
scared me a little with the no redundant path. You got one person and like 6 people, 4, whatever, 2 part-time. Like, is that sustainable to maintain? Or do we need to put more bodies on it? Like, are we staffing it appropriately now? Like, because there is a lot of value in it. And then I wonder, from a financial perspective, you talked about, them covering the cost of, transfer and override and then the annual costs and whether that's sustainable or not. That's just anybody's best guess. But I'm well aware of the fees and on the phones and stuff. And the state is trying to accumulate funds and pay for it and get single points. I didn't realize the discrepancy with Massachusetts and other states. That was interesting. But quality, does this address other than that redundant example you gave, where boom, boom, I'm going, how's our infrastructure? How's our network going out where we communicate, from downtown? How's our stuff behind the desk that we're using? Is that up to date? And is that something that we're gonna soon have to update as well, and that would go away too, or?
So
Like-
that we qualify for some state grant funds every year to be able to try to keep our system up to date. We could certainly have police and fire talk about that. The police chief has managed the dispatch center, and so he could come in. Scott James has been the point of contact lately. We can have Scott address that for you at a meeting in probably August, before he departs as well. So we do get some grant money for that, but it's also somewhat competitive, and it rolls, so it's not automatic. So we need to be aware of that, and what doesn't get picked up by them in the long run would have to be picked up by us. If we felt the need to go to something and we didn't get a grant for it, then we'd have to pick it up. We've been very lucky so far, but again, that's not something that we can guarantee forever either.
Do we know when made the transition?
Wenham made the transition over a decade ago, and they made the decision almost entirely based on finances and the fact that they had been involved in the conversations with the MAPC for, at that point, over 5 or 6 years as well. Way back before I got into town government and I worked for MAPC, I used to be at those meetings in the Wenham Fire Station, talking with Anne Marie Cullen and everybody here. Hamilton was involved in those discussions. They made the decision at the time that they didn't think it was ready, and they chose not to go. So my hometown of Swampscott eventually chose not to go to the rec, although they were involved in discussions. Ultimately, Swampscott joined Salem and went to went to a regional PSAP anyway. So, but they were able to get Salem. They went to Lynn. They were able to get Lynn to take them for no cost. So
Is Lynn getting money from the state then to cover that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a little bit of a unique situation. Lynn was getting some credit for being a regional PSAP at the time because they were doing fire dispatch for Swampscott, and the mayor of Lynn at the time told the town administrator, I happen to know them both personally, told the town administrator in Swampscott that she wanted to charge him to move his police over. And then the mayor in Salem said, well, I'll take all of it for nothing, and I won't charge you. So then the mayor of Lynn changed her tune and said, no, we'll just take just the police and keep you both, because she was gonna lose a lot of grant money if she let the Swampscott fire leave. So they made the decision to take Swampscott police rather than lose the grant money. So the state's been pushing for regional dispatch, as I said, for well over a decade. I was working in MAPC in 2007, and we were asked to work on a number of those types of issues for towns that were considering it at the time. And folks are absolutely right. The first iteration of it was not well managed, it was not well run. They've been doing a lot better job of it in the last 5 years.
So right now it's Essex, Middleton, Topsfield, and Wenham. And are there other people?
Manchester is
joining
in,
it?
Georgetown is going in, or Georgetown is in. And then Groveland has been accepted in. North Reading? North Reading's been accepted in. And Boxford is in line with us. I know that because of our existing relationship with Wenham and our history with Wenham, we got moved to the head of the line ahead of Boxford. They actually wanted to move us in, as I said earlier, and I told them that we hadn't had enough.
So they're gonna do Boxford next, is that?
No, they would be taking Groveland next, because Groveland has almost no working dispatchers at the moment. And then the biggest town that they're taking is North Reading, so they'd be taking North Reading. Their plan is to take North Reading in November, and then they would be able to take us and/or Boxford at some point after that, based on who says yes and signs an IMA first, if you choose to go in that direction.
Have we gotten any references yet from people who recently joined, and have they noticed an improvement, level service or any?
Manchester had spoken highly of the transition. It took them a couple times to do it. There had initially been a lot of public outcry to stay, and eventually they were able to get agreement from the police and fire, and they moved. And the town administrator, who just retired, was very complimentary of the regional. The new town administrator that just took over came from a situation where they had a regional because Nahat now dispatches through Lynn as well. And the new town administrator in Manchester came from Nahat. So he's familiar with regional dispatch and is braced for it, so.
Police and fire, so it sounds like Manchester was a recent addition.
In Georgetown.
In Georgetown. I mean,
Regional, sorry to butt in.
I thought Georgetown.
Rowley.
Oh, Rowley, okay, apologies, sorry.
Sorry,
Thank you
sorry.
for correcting me. I don't like to say the wrong thing. Sorry.
Yeah, so Rowley's a new addition. Where I'm going with this is, you know, the people who are the first responders, the people who then are the ones who go, are gonna have, I think, the most intimate knowledge of like kind of like before and after as well. I'd like to potentially hear from some of those folks of what the change in service has meant to them. And like specifically around like any of the, if there's data as well to kind of back it up, you know, that says like this used to be our response time, this is our response time now. This was the number of times we were directed to the wrong address, now it's this number, right? Like kind of like some of the key metrics that are like important, like this is, it's public safety as well, right? Like a lot of these situations are gonna be, you know, the seconds and minutes are gonna matter for some people. I think that it's important for us to hear from our own police chief and fire chief here to help guide us in this decision. So, you know, as we start to structure this round of meetings, I think we need to be hearing from other experts who can help translate this a bit for us as a board. So I want to be hearing from those people who are kind of, you know, on the business end of this, not just the inputs of the dollars and cents, right? There's the outputs and the outcomes, but I really want to hear from people who have data and experience in it. My point of view. And if we're, you know, Bill, sound kind of like you're starting to go there as well around if we're not currently staffed appropriately, or right, it's like if there's staffing issues at the regional one. I know they have a larger pool, and that does happen in both places. I hear you on that, Joe. Like that, it's like the mandatory overtime. It's happening kind of everywhere in these types of jobs, and the service industry is pretty rampant, right? So, you know, if that's the state of affairs, you know, when people are part of, you have to imagine too, it's like, and Rosemary's kind of building on this, right around the social fabric of people feeling really invested in their community, when it's like you have to do that extra hard shift, or like, you know, make that sacrifice on your own life to come and do that shift, you know, that there's like an extra level of, you know, I'm sure attention and care that goes into it, somewhat intangible. But I just want to say, I don't think this is a decision we should make lightly, nor do I think it's something that we should feel like we have to like meet a timeline or a deadline on either. It sounds like they're taking people like every 3 months or 6 months, and I know that it might mean that we have to do a reassessment of things, and that there may be a sunset on the report that we have, and it might gum up the works. So I don't, if this board, as it's currently composed, if it's the first time that we're all hearing this, and it's up to us to make the decision ultimately, really we'll make sure we do our due diligence, and because of the health and safety aspects associated with it and the lives that could be impacted.
Yeah, I mean, it might be, we talked earlier about, hey, how do you have a meeting with a moderator? Maybe we don't need a moderator, but this is a good meeting where you bring in the dispatchers union, you bring in the chief of police and fire, and maybe even the E911 board that did the study, and we kind of just, you know, dig in. I don't know what the board thinks, but that could be a good kind of group, not open to public, but those groups in having dialogue, you know, and maybe we think about questions in advance and go through kind of pros and cons.
I really
whether
want
financial or service or impact, right? And, thanks. But I agree, not likely. I know this has a 90-day sunset on it, but, I think we've got several meetings, you know, ahead of
I
us.
really want to hear from experts in particular, right?
Yeah, I
It's
think
like,
the
you know, it's
data,
like-
like who's gone in, and Wenham too, you said Wenham, because most of the stuff I've read, you know, from citizens, and it might just be emotional that, you know, they're not happy with it, you know, several have reached out to me, but are you hearing from, the town itself on stats, on some of the metrics, KPIs, whatever, things they look at and measure, time of call and stuff like that, that it's all favorable? There's been no
So far,
lack?
everything we've heard is favorable.
And I think one of the other questions is, specifically for us, how would it be relatively easy for Hamilton to integrate the regional system versus what they do now? How is it different? How do they think it would benefit us or cause a delay? Sort of, what information does a dispatcher pass on, and what would be different from our dispatchers? I mean, it seems like the police or the fire who live in the town have a very good idea of where addresses are. So I think if I think about it, when it passes on the information, the local entity is the one who needs to know how to get to a particular house, I would think. So,
Fair point. I'll do my best to line some folks up for a future meeting.
I think that's probably the next step.
Yeah.
I mean, technology is there, I mean, for, you know, GPS and coordinating and stuff, I do know that's good, but, you know, yeah, it's a lot more discussion, and I think I wanna hear from, you know, the chiefs as well as, the folks in the dispatch, whether it's the union members or not, if they're all union, but,
and some residents, certainly.
and maybe we solicit feedback somehow, get that
Well, I
feedback.
think that's important because
No, is it as simple as saying for an extra $200, you know, I'll take it and do that? Does that cover and make it sustainable? I think it's sustainability too. I mean, it's like the idea of one single point of failure. If someone doesn't show up for a shift, what do you do? You know, how do you coordinate that? And it's probably a lot of effort and work, and that has to break at some point. I don't know how we do that, and that might just be, maybe it's just more staffing and you could keep that, but, you know, like, what is that annual cost versus that? I mean, I don't know if I believe that forever, or this is like cell companies do, hey, you all new customers, you get this free, but then, you know, I got you here. But that could happen. But if everyone that Ben listed is getting it, are they, or is just the new ones coming in? The cost savings, no annual cost?
No, everybody
Everyone's getting it.
everybody that's there pays nothing for their dispatch.
I didn't know that. That is.
I didn't know that either.
That's a significant amount of money.
So I'll just make a couple comments if I can. I just first want to flag and that I work for the state, and my agency, the technology agency, does play a support in 911 as far as cybersecurity. And I don't think it's a conflict, but before I vote on anything, I want to make sure that I investigate that and file any necessary disclosure. So I just want to put that on the record. So I will do that due diligence before we make any votes. So I just wanted to flag that. Hearing everything tonight, I am supportive of having some sort of meeting where we have all of the stakeholders get together and sort of get all the information. Because I feel like, you know, I think as a board, we have an obligation to explore it, you know, because it is a potential cost savings. But I feel like there's a lot of questions that have been raised. You know, I appreciate the testimony in the comment from the dispatchers, you know, and I think they raised some good questions about, you know, response time at the regional offices. I think if we can get some data around that, if we have the regional team here to ask questions, I think that'd be helpful. One question that came up as far as cost to Hamilton for future years, I think there was one during public comment that, you know, I know that it seems like there's no cost to Hamilton now, but is that, you know, forever baked into a contract? Is there, you know, something that we may have costs, you know, 3-4 years down the road? So I think it's important to understand what the long-term impact is. And then I do want to look at, sort of understand the impact, and I think it'll be helpful if we have someone from the dispatchers, sort of like the impact on personnel, and maybe hear from you, Joe, as well, if there's impact, if we did move in this direction, what happens to our current personnel? Like is there opportunity for them to go to the regional and work there? Is there other opportunities? I'd like to understand, like, if that was a direction that the board moved in, like, what is the impact on our current personnel, and how are they, how are they impacted by that? One other thought too is sort of the impact of our current, costs for dispatch. I think you said it's about $600,000 a year. What is that expected to grow? Is that expected to maintain? What is that? How does that relate to our current budget? And is there any sort of concerns around, future budgets being able to meet those obligations? I'd like to understand, is that, well within our budget sort of thing? And I want to understand how that it is impacting our current budget. So sort of all that information I think is going to be helpful to understand big picture wise, and I think we're at the beginning stages, but I do want to know, is there a timeline that we need to be thinking about, and if so, when can we sort of start pulling all these stakeholders together? Okay. And I'm not saying you have to have the answers now, but those are just some of the questions I'm thinking about.
Hoping you didn't want just a couple. Yep. All right.
Any other discussion? So I think next steps would be to invite some stakeholders in, have another meeting, maybe if we can lay out, the cost structure there. I'm interested in the annual piece. I knew that number, but, other upgrade costs, like what would we think about as a community to make sure we have the best, not only people, but systems that they can work on? Do we have a step function of cost down the road that we got to consider in that, and do the terms of any regional agreement? Is there any fine print in there that says that it's for 90 days, 2 years, 3 years, or is it not spoken to? I'd like to know if there's any language in there relative to the longevity of the current proposal for the annual cost in particular. I'm sure they'll do the upgrade costs. I don't think it's like an HOA, right, or like when they buy stuff, they're gonna go to each town to pay for it. Maybe there is, but just from a financial perspective, that would all be good to know. And then really it's I think we'll hear from the folks who operate the desk and others really, and citizens, the pros and cons of a sustainable local program, that will, I like what you said out in the onset, actually, of is like, it's not about the people in the role, yourself, us here, or even on this board, it's for the town of Hamilton's sustainability long-term. What's the best thing? It's our obligation to look at everything, as I said at the beginning, I'm a big fan of the local piece for this. I would pay extra for that for sure, but, it's our responsibility to go through the process. So we'll set that up, and after the 21st meeting at some point, but not before. So yeah, you can start.
Mr. Chair, just before we move on to the next agenda item, I just wanted to see if you still needed me to stick around for the rest of the meeting, or if we were all set at this
Tom,
point.
I think we're good. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Thanks for taking the time.
Okay, all right, thanks. I'll see you on Monday.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks.
Thank you.
night.
Goal setting. So are we looking to have a workshop and discuss the schedule for that?
Yeah, so I was asked to put both this and the next item on the agenda so that, you can discuss them together.
Yeah, right.
Mr. Olson wants the board to try to come up with a time to review me. I would note that in my review of the past 12 months, new goals were never really established for the town manager, so I guess you'd be judging me against the priority goals for 2023 that we had in place. There was no update to that in '24. We had some conversation about it, but nothing really changed, and you conducted a review of me in the fall of '24, but nothing was updated since then. So we need to have a conversation with the board about what the goals going forward are for the next 12 to 18 months are, and then what you'd be judging the town manager against once those are set. And I would assume that if we're gonna schedule a performance review for me, we'd be looking at the old goals and the current, operating conditions and judging me based on my performance in the last year against those things.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we look at that, and then we look at, do we have a form or something we could use, and even just go back individually, each of us, and kind of talk about things that were accomplished in the last 12 months
So
in
we gave you
advance.
examples of things that we used the last couple times that we've done this, so those are in your packet. I definitely think they can be updated and tightened up to some degree, if you like.
All right, we do need some structure around this. I didn't realize, first, and I think a workshop for goal setting is probably warranted in our schedule of, I think we have meetings every week right now, but like, any recommendations on a time? You know, we've done these on Saturdays, we've done these at night and brought in some pizzas or something, but, you know, just how do we kind of sit down? Maybe we do a little work up front, kind of looking at things that, we'll send out a format or view that we've used historically, and people can add comments and kind of rate and discuss. The major pillars, I think, are the same. I think if we align that, maybe there's some goals that we'll fill within that weren't there, but if we speak to the pillars about communication, water, you know, I'm looking at the list here, town hall, you know, how that's gone, but we could send a form out, make it so that, you know, we can do some type of met or not met, but I'm more interested in a couple sentences of kind of, here's, you know, what we've accomplished and we're able to do. Joe, as, you know, our town manager, you know, here are some of the areas I think we need to work on, and those are the things we kind of will work on as a group, you know, to put into the next set of goals and objectives. But I think we owe, before the fall of this year, that would be 1 year from a review, and I think we kind of made some commitments with you, even with your contract, that would look at some stuff, and I want to abide by that. But if we line up and get the goals set up and we get the pillars and we kind of lay out accomplishments or areas of opportunity where I think, you know, maybe we fell short or we could work on, and now we've identified goals to do that, we can come up with, you know, an assessment and rating on the past 12 months. I think that would be the plan, in my opinion. So looks like we have a calendar of events in our packet as well.
Yeah, July, August, and September for calendars outlining, you have meetings scheduled this month. You have a special town meeting next Monday and another select board meeting on the 21st, as you know. Then you have August 4th and 18th and September 8th and 22nd as scheduled dates. You can add in a meeting somewhere in there. I know you've all done a lot of meetings lately. I think we had 4 meetings in June. We had 3 meetings in May, 3 meetings in April, so you've been meeting extra as it is. You may want to add a meeting in August, do the workshop, and update the goals. And then, as I said, I was reviewed previously in the fall of '24, so you could do September, October, something like that. Your reference to my contract. On my anniversary date in September, which will be September, on or about September 5th, under the current contract, the board is able to extend me another year. But that's based on your review, satisfactory review. So if you want to exercise that option, you would want to conduct the review sometime in that timeframe.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think we owe you a discussion 1 year in like that, and so I think the timetable lines, I think maybe this month, and I can work with you on it, Joe, is we can, you know, I can kind of get the prior goal setting into a view and format where I can get it out to the team, you know, and they can provide, you know, some input. And then we can give, you know, into August where we'll align, you know, somewhere second or third week. I don't know if people have any preference in, it should be a different night, not our every other Monday, which we already have set for the 4th and the 18th, you know, but, you know, I find it either works for, you know, a 6:30 type of during the week or a Saturday morning, you know, could work, but that time of year can be a challenge, you know, with vacations.
I would just say my biggest issue with August will be my oldest will be departing for college around on or about the 25th. So the weekend prior to that, what might be difficult for us is we move JJ to Assumption University and stuff, and then
There you go.
So
maybe a weeknight's better. Any thoughts from the board on a night? We should kind of like hone in. I think we've honed in already. We're gonna get you guys, you know, a goal setting sheet with an opportunity to provide some comments on things that were accomplished and maybe areas of opportunity. Yeah, but I'll help Joe, we'll isolate that, we'll get that so people can start working on it. And then that's middle of August, like, any thoughts on a Wednesday or Thursday night at 6:30, or a Saturday morning preference?
I wouldn't just my 2 cents, I wouldn't mind a Wednesday or Thursday early evening. I'm not in Boston unless I'm in court, but I don't think, I think a Wednesday or Thursday would be okay for me at a 6:30 time.
13th, I can do the 13th or 14th in August. If it's
I'm not looking at the
Wednesday,
calendar.
Thursday in the middle
Yeah,
of August.
it's Wednesday, Thursday, yep.
Tom, you have thoughts? I mean, I think so I'm hearing a weeknight is better than a Saturday, right? I'm kind of the theme so far. Tom, I don't know if you ever thought, and we can,
Between the 13th and the 14th, I could do the 13th. The 14th, I might be unavailable.
why don't we tentatively shoot for that?
What time you want to say? You said early evening, is that 5:30 or is that 6:30 or?
Wouldn't matter to me.
Yeah, so I'm flexible.
Maybe 6?
Let's split 6 o'clock. Let's tentatively shoot for that. Let's, I'll send it out to Mr. Olson. If anyone has, gets back and looks at a
for goal
calendar,
setting or is
sees
this for
something.
review?
So this is gonna be, goal setting right now.
Yep.
Because I think we're gonna come back around with a review probably in the middle of September.
Okay.
But I do wanna shoot for, I'll lay it out in an email, like some information back during that goal setting, because that's gonna help with the goal setting process. That sheet, which is also gonna lead into the review. Is there another review form in here that was that it?
So, no, there was this one, there was, this built this up, and then this one here was the earlier one from the year prior. I guess it was the same. It was also 23, so this
Okay.
was the actual evaluation form based on the priority goals form, so.
Okay.
But again, this can be, you don't have to follow the exact same template as you did 2 years ago, you can tweak it.
Let me get a look at the template, and we'll figure out what works for us.
A
but-
timeline, though, worked out? Sorry, I just heard you say something about kind of for your contract renewal, and that is the end of September, or middle, or beginning, or
So
something?
you're eligible to extend me another year after my anniversary date, which would be September 5th.
Okay.
So,
But he's got a 3-year contract, so it's an option we could exercise for various reasons, which I can review.
The idea being that on the 5th, that, it basically goes down to a 2-year contract, and you can have me under 3-year contract at any time. So you built this contract with 2 option years. So it was a 3-year contract that actually expires December of 27, and then you would be voting to extend it to December of 28, and then next year you could do the same thing if you wanted to, if you still were happy with me.
So we'll go over all that too.
That was the board's.
And we may put it on one of those meetings in advance, to talk openly about, the options in his contract, stuff like that, pros, cons, what. But I think so I don't know if it has to align on that September 5th date or whatever it was, but it should be
No.
September.
Yeah, it doesn't have to align on September 5th.
So in this meeting that we're tentatively planning for August 13th, this is the goal setting
Yes.
for both, for the select board and Joe, or for Joe only?
They should be intertwined, but I mean, I think this is primarily what it'll be, they're not, for Joe, it'll be on a form for Joe, but they're goals we want to accomplish.
Yeah.
So think about that. I mean, we're gonna give him goals that
Yep.
line up with what we want to accomplish. So do you have a list of things maybe to send out, that you've collected of things we've got to get done? The honey-do list? I thought you always kept one of those, huh?
I did.
That might help people
I did
think
for a
about-
long time, and then this year became really difficult to manage. The to-do list kind of became unwieldy. And then I stopped wanting to add to it because I felt like nothing was leaving and everything was adding, so I was like, you know what? Let's take things in order of fire sale, so like what's on fire and what do I have to address right now? I have to get back to that. I can put together.
Okay, well, send me those two examples. I'll get stuff out, everyone just, and it'll provide some commentary about the meeting on the 13th.
Okay.
So then, I think the next one kind of goes in with it. I think we're gonna target an annual review in September, but date to be TBD. The cell tower updates, I don't know, I did have so, did you have some comments you want to make on that first, and then I'll?
Yeah, so I did have an interesting conversation from Samantha Willis from Tower Alliance. She had reached out to me last week and was going to see if they would want to extend their offer a little bit and see if she could, as she said, make it a little bit better than the 627. So currently, as you recall, the last time we got an actual written offer to buy out the lease from Tower Alliance, they wanted 99 years for $627,000. We told them that was not going to happen. They had suggested maybe 50 years, and now they're saying, how about 50 years, and we might be able to make the offer a little bit more. 50-year lease would have to be approved at a town meeting. The board's ability to approve a 50-year ground lease would, approved ground lease would end at 10. So you'd be able to do something for up to 10 years, and buying them out, they're gonna have an option to maintain that lease for longer than is currently left on the current term. So you had a town meeting vote that established the town's ability to enter into a 30-year lease. They're looking to buy us out of that and add years to it. And so, Bill had also asked us to talk with someone who actually brokers kind of buyout easements. And we had a conversation and an offer from Lisa Diamond. That contract, that scope of services agreement was in your packet as well. And I can let Bill talk a little more to that. I had a nice conversation with Lisa. The idea being that if you didn't want to just go with Tower Alliance, she could go out to the market and see if she could get us a better deal, but she would potentially get paid some piece of that better deal, so.
Yeah, and apparently, what she would RFP it, and there are many companies like Tower that would respond to an RFP, and I don't think it's a long process, to be honest. I don't think it has the rigor and stuff that we do when we talk RFPs for town stuff. But she would, go out and solicit and talk to other companies, and first she would go through our agreement, and she would look at all the payments they did, and she could audit it to see if we missed anything. I don't think we have. We had one miss, but they made that.
We audited it back in December, and we think we're pretty close, so.
So she would reconcile, okay, but here's what you signed up for, here's what you got, here's your potential on to go forward. I've got a book of companies that would want an option to consider as well. She would RFP it, and she would broker a deal with whoever's buying it. So technically, she says it wouldn't come out of us, and I don't, unless I think it was this company, I think it was a $5,000
Right,
fee.
it's $5,000 fee if it comes out of Tower Alliance.
So if this was the best offer, we'd probably have to pay $5,000, but she would go through that work to see if that's the best. They keep moving. I know that 627 was on 675.
Right.
And I really think that was baloney. So I don't know if you specifically asked. I don't want her to just go back to that, because I think that offer should be good.
Well, so she's going back to try to get it back up to 675 or something like, so Samantha had asked what our trepidation was, and I said, quite frankly, the board wasn't thrilled that you sent out a written offer at 675 and then adjusted it downward by almost $50,000 based on a rumor about what might be happening with one of the carriers that was on the tower. I said, but, we've heard through backdoor channels that is calming down, and that's reflected in the stock price of the company that you were worried about. So we would expect that you would want to adjust that. So she said, let me go back and see what I can do.
And I don't have a crystal ball to know. It's 675, if you recall. I was like, wow, that's pretty good. So I don't know. There's one other company I think that might get excited for this, and it's, it could be worth hearing, but because we've never asked anybody else but the company that built it and operates it. So, they're closest to it, and they're getting close to my, the number that I said, a couple years ago when we started this whole process. But
so each year that goes by, you're going to expect a little bit less of a return potentially, because there's less years that they're buying out. Although this request was to add years to it as well for that amount.
But it's much shorter than if we kept it 20 years and got monthly rents, for 4 carriers that, that thing's it'll get filled at some point. But, so I guess the question to this board is, this is in hand, do we go back and say, hey, 675, that's what you told us, you had some thoughts out there, nothing's developed, and that was a month ago. So you honor that when we run, or do we for probably $5,000, potentially, if this held true and that was the best price, it would cost us $5,000 to find out if another 6 or 7 companies might beat that. That's really the roll of the dice here. And I could go either way on it. I'm not sliding you guys either way on it. It's a lot of money. It's what we talked about, funding a year right there. But you're also getting rid of an asset that is an annuity ongoing that could fill. That's always a risk, but they do a net present value analysis, and this number here gets you into that number where it's close. They still make out big if they can get 3-4 carriers on that. They wouldn't be here asking us if they don't think they're getting more carriers on that thing. They're being more aggressive than I would have thought they would have been. So that's why, up to now, I've been like, keep going. And even now, I'm like 675
right now.
It's only around,
What's that?
the annual intakes, I don't even think it's at 70 yet. If we add more carriers, it might get to 70, but I don't even think it's at 70.
What are we getting right now? 23 for the 2, so double it? Is that what we're getting?
Yeah.
We're getting 2,300 per, so you do 2,300 roughly with an escalator of 3% a year, times 2 right now, then you take it by 4 as they grow it every 3%. I did a formula out 20 years, I can send it around.
But the impact to you, so that
Did I hear
becomes
that right?
operating
We're
revenue
getting-
for this number of years, and it's
We're getting
impact annually is
2,300,
much lesser than.
like $2,300, is that what you said?
The last we look, I don't know, do you have the lease amounts on there?
I can get it.
70,000 annually. No.
That could, I'll send you guys a spreadsheet. I thought I had it on this computer. I have it in the thumb drive. You have it, Joe? No? Probably not.
Sorry,
Oh, it's the first thing I thought of, Ben. I mean, that's the first,
I should have had it.
we didn't
My
bring it, but I
my
mean,
mistake.
I could probably find it too on this. This goes quicker. I'm having a Wi-Fi issue on this.
So, so I feel like, I don't think we're at the 70,000 yet, because I think the Bill's right. It is an annual escalator. It started out at 2,300 per carrier. For first couple of years, you only had 1 carrier on, then we added a second carrier on it.
Right.
So you're getting 2,300 per month per carrier, but each year the agreement goes up by like 3%. So the first year it was 2,300, then it was 2,300 times 3%. That was the rate
That gets
picked
up
up
to
for the
3,000,
second.
4,000. I mean, it grows.
But,
Yeah.
you know,
Maybe
that
was the-
impact is around somewhere between 50 and 65,000 annually for you right now that you can use in your operating budget
Right.
versus $627 or $675,000 that you can use in your capital budget. That is the difference too. If you take this money and sell the asset, it becomes money that you use as one time. You don't get to use it
You
in
don't
the
have
annual
it,
operating
right,
budget,
Exactly.
but it provides you money for a lot of, that you can use to limit your need to tax the citizens to address capital needs. So it does provide a benefit.
It's just that it's a one-time benefit, I think.
Yeah.
And
But if we-
when,
if
and
we'd
when
had-
do you run out of assets to sell?
But for instance, if we'd had the ability to sell this for $627,000, the year that we wanted a fire truck, we wouldn't have had to go out and bond that.
Yeah, for $1 million. Yeah.
When we
Yeah.
bond though, what are we bonding at? Like, what's our interest rate on the notes for that?
Yeah, I can't find the file. I wish I could.
I can get that for you. I don't have that off the top of my head.
We-
Just to remember that, the high projected, I remember reading that in the agreement, however many
Yeah, I think
years
we're-
ago, that it was, the max was going to be $70,000.
So we can look at it. So first is, I don't think we should take anything less than 675, because she told me that's what she'd give us for, and then she made a reason why she took it down, and that reason has no validity to it, in my opinion. So she may come back and just say, well, I'll work on it and get back to where she started. So we could just take that, or we roll the dice. Did Lisa tell you how long, like, it would take to run that, and then this doesn't go away if we did that, right?
No, well, until we've sold it, we can always have conversations with those people, but will they keep their offer at where it's at?
Yeah, they may find market value that comes back much less, or may expose something else, I mean, but,
And also, are you comfortable with the 50-year term? I wouldn't recommend. you
well, that's the other
99.
piece too.
But, do you want to keep it at 50, or would you want to counter and say, tell Tower Alliance, we'll sell it to you for $675,000 for a new 30-year lease, so it's the remainder, and then we'll extend it out to 30. We'd still probably need to get town meeting approval. I'll have to confirm that with town council. Because, we may not, because it's an extension of less than 10 years, and you have the authority to go up to 10 years, so we might be able to do it without a town meeting vote. Town meeting had authorized a 30-year lease, so that's what we're in the middle of right now. If you sold the lease and wanted to extend it out to 30 years again, you might be within your right to do it without a town meeting vote. Beyond 30 years, you need a town meeting vote.
It was 20 years initially, wasn't it?
It was 30. It was 30, yeah.
Okay.
This lease was 30?
99% sure. Now you're making me guess.
I haven't
Now you're
looked at
both
it a
asking me
bit.
because you're making me second guess myself.
I didn't put
But
this on the agenda.
I've
but-
been thinking about it as a 30-year lease for the last 7 years, so.
I mean, when this started, they wanted us, what, 400,000 or something like that, right?
Yeah, they were
So
down.
we've come a
in the
long
400s.
way.
They were down in the 400s, 428 or something like that.
428, I think was their starting point, so we've definitely made some progress. So the question is, they've moved for a reason, for sure. But I can't sit here and say I wouldn't take 675. But
Joe, I'd like to hear your comments about what you think we could use that money for in a very sort of one-time productive way. That definitely, I think, would be a factor for me, instead of just saying, oh, we could use it for operating expenses. I like the idea of investing it in some tangible item that we need, but wouldn't otherwise be able to afford.
Yeah, so we'd need to use it not on an operating expense, but we'd need to use it on a capital expense if we sell the lease out and get the large sum of money.
Okay, good.
So, as it is, because it's a 30-year recurring payment, we can count on it as operating expense for the length of the lease. So that's what we've been doing.
Right,
It goes to the bottom
exactly.
line of the general fund, and we appropriate it as part of the annual budget process.
Right.
We can look at the capital plan as it is right now and forecast for you what we could use that money for, so that we could avoid having to take money from free cash or from the capital stabilization fund or from having to raise and appropriate.
Right,
But you can think of a couple projects that have been done just in the last couple of years. The new fuel station behind Town Hall.
Oh, gee, that's exciting.
It's not exciting, but it was money that you had to take from another area to get it done, because we needed to do it. So now we've spent, $700,000 to put a new fuel station and a canopy over it. It does what it needs to do so the town can continue to operate, but that money came from somewhere. There are other projects like that we could use this money for, that would keep us from having to spend, and that way the money that you appropriate from free cash can be on the nice things that you want to spend it on, like parks. And you could tell me that you want us to put it into the Patton Park master plan and wipe out, the first phase of improvements to Patton Park. That would be something that we could do with it.
I'd like to really look at our capital plan. I haven't looked at it for a little while. It'd be interesting to see what kind of projects we could invest in. I think that would be a factor in terms of how reasonable it is to have this lease bought out. I think that would be
It's a good point. If you're gonna
Influencing
spend that
factor.
kind of money at one time, spend it on things that will be noticed in the community. So if you could focus on Patton Park, and we could pick out things from the Patton Park master plan that would otherwise take 4, 5, 6 years to get
Yeah,
to.
there are other things though too, that,
Improvements to the Council on Aging building.
for instance. I don't know, it just seems like there are a lot of interesting projects that we could invest the money in. And that would be, like I said, an influencing factor, at least for me. I don't know
understand.
about for others.
I understand.
Okay, so, are we done with that?
You want me to go back to Samantha and take it or leave it offer? And what's the term? Is it 675 at X term? Or we're gonna go to market? We could do that. We could say to Tower Alliance, we appreciate the offer. If you can come up to 675 and accept a 30-year term, we do a deal. If you're not willing to do that, we'll go to market and see what we can get.
I'm exhausted.
That's why I wanted to know if we were finished.
Yeah, I really need to answer that question too. I can't, I wish I had that sheet.
Yeah.
What is your, I mean, I think 675 could be a good number. The years in the lease, I guess I'll leave up to you guys. 50 seems like a long time. I mean, I would really want to understand. I don't know if I've ever talked to this company about what does that mean? Like, do they own that? Like, do they have free access anytime they want? Are we losing any, you know, they're.
So they have an easement right to it. They don't have, you know, we need to provide.
Does any of
them
that
the ability-
change if they buy out that lease?
we could make them accept the terms that are in the current lease and just extend the term to what we want to extend it to. I would say that there was a big conversation at town meeting when this was originally brought forward, and the town, I went back and looked through the minutes at the town meeting, when the town originally agreed to do this, they did it at 30 years because the cell tower company was asking for 50, and town meeting said they thought that was too long, and they amended it to 30 years. So they accepted, and there was even debate about whether 30 years was too long, but it did get passed at 30 years.
Yeah, because technology changes so much, and want to make sure that it's commensurate with public safety too.
The lease is for the space, and so once the tower is up,
Oh,
they can
right.
change the technologies on the tower. That's not
Right.
the issue,
Well,
in terms of making a deal on the space.
right. I don't know. To be
So does
con-
anyone think we should roll the dice and have an RFP done?
Well,
or-
what would that cost us?
Well, that would, right, according to this contract, it says like, it would cost us nothing. It would be worked into, if another carrier took it. If Alliance did it, because this is already negotiated, she would want $5,000 for running through her process and asking 5 or 6 other
So
companies.
if she ran through her process, came back to us and was Tower Alliance for $627,000, then she would take $5,000 off that $627. If she comes back at $675, she's still only getting $5,000. If she goes to another carrier and she get the best offer in the market is from another carrier, she'd work out her payment through them, not us. Which, you know, is ultimately coming off of what they're gonna give us, but.
Right, but it would have to be greater than 675 if it went that way, right? So, yeah, I'm not leaning either way, I know, right now, because I think we're at a point at 675 might be just worth it to do it. I would like to know what we're gonna do with it. I wanna make sure I understand, you know, what they could do. What does that mean to them? Could they go and, rebuild that tower, put 10 people on it? Could they go over densify it? What else, what other attachments might they put on it? Is that thing gonna be noticeably different once they own the rights to it? Because right now, we get a co-share of everything, I think they have to run through us. Do they
Well,
still?
Right, that was my question about the technology that's put up there. Is it sort of experimental
Right.
technology, or does it have to be proven safe?
Like, do they say maximum of attachments is what it is right now? Or are they saying, no, we reserve the right to grow it? And then all of a sudden, you're looking at a much different thing out there.
Well, I think
We do lose a little bit of that control if we don't own it or have a say in it.
What would people think about putting an RFP and just test the market a little bit? What's the downside to testing the market with an RFP?
the downside is you don't get an offer as good as this one.
And then they pull it.
Tower Alliance either pulls their offer or reduces it.
That's your downside. I mean, whether that happens or not, I mean, they've done their diligence, they've got a number.
Yeah, but we don't have, it's like just having one bid, right?
Yeah, we didn't even get a bid, we got an offer.
Well, I mean,
Right.
in essence,
Right,
sort of, we only have one offer,
right,
right? So,
it's a person, right.
and I don't really know what the other offers could potentially be, so.
Yeah, 675 is a good offer.
Okay, only because
I'd
you're in the
probably take it.
business, you.
Well, yeah, I hate to say, you know, because, I don't know, this isn't really, I mean, I'm in a industry, but I don't do this, you know, but I do math, so I did some math, and that, to me, isn't a bad deal, 675, so,
Okay.
you know, might be tempted to take this at 675 and be done with it,
They'd have to agree to that, because currently that is not the offer, so I'd have to get them.
unless they're gonna honor their bid on whatever that date was. You know, we feel like you obviously feel there's movement in this number, we're gonna check what that movement's like, and we'll engage Lisa.
Okay.
So, unless we don't want a decision right now. I mean, we could just take that, we could throw it on the 21st, not to kick the can, but it's a lot of money. It's personally, if it was my asset, I would shop it for sure, but this isn't my money. But we've had a very motivated person who built it, moved from 428 to 675 in a number of years. They didn't do that because they like us. Generally, there's a,
Do you wonder if this is at all tied with the sudden recent slowdown in interest in a second tower? Like we've been talking to Everest about renewing interest in a second tower behind the public safety building, and that interest has waned since we've been sitting on this offer. Not waned, but there has not been any further conversation since we've been sitting on this offer.
yeah, because they might have something, that they might have somebody else who wants to get on that only if they can get downtown, so they're packaging, it's a domino effect to that. Because there's value in those two spots. So, which we could hold too, build it, have two leases, and then now you got two to sell, but it's an asset, you know, you get rid of an asset, that can appreciate on you, especially if you're growing a portfolio with other sites. I know you guys just want an answer, but,
I just keep putting it on the agenda because you guys asked me to, so it's not,
yeah.
I mean,
I didn't do a lot of homework on this one, to be honest with you, before this. I would've had that file up and looked at it.
when we finish this conversation, can you start signing these?
Yeah, let's start signing. I'll,
That's
any other,
That's the first one, and then that's the second one.
what is this?
That's the Winthrop School lease, and then this.
I thought we already did that.
No, you guys. you
What did we
didn't give
sign?
me- You signed the cemetery.
Oh, okay.
Signed the cemetery.
You have a good team.
Should I sign second line?
Just leave a spot. and-
Slept for 3 hours.
Sign afterwards if you want.
Hanging on, white knuckle.
Oh,
Why are there two like this? Is it?
is it time to make that?
No,
This
one
the
of
district, right?
That's the district,
Special-
right. That was,
So I
this
don't
was
sign-
just that. You
So we
sign that
don't
one.
sign that.
No, yeah, but keep it together, because we need to send this package to this, the
Okay.
district to sign.
Is it time to make that
Yeah,
special motion?
Yeah, we're not gonna make them.
What is this? What are we doing?
Yeah, okay. Send it.
3 hours of sleep after 22 hours
I don't know what we're signing,
Send
but
this with.
All right,
This is the Winthrop School lease.
we're gonna punt that one to the
Next one is
21st. I'll take a motion.
a motion,
Yeah.
I make a motion that we adjourn for the evening.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night. That's a wrap.